Hey everyone, this is Mia Horror Stories, and the title of today's horror story is I'm a long-haul truck driver, and the hitchhiker I picked up knows my secrets. For your comfort, the screen will stay black throughout the video, so you can relax without strain and just focus on the story. Make sure you stick around until the end. Sometimes, the last few moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. The first strange thing was the passenger side door. It didn't swing all the way shut on the first try. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just one of those ugly little half latches that happen when a truck has done too many miles, too many winters, too many slamming rest stop exits with coffee in one hand and paperwork in the other. The dome light stayed on for an extra second, glowing over the dash, and the heap of gas station receipts on the center console, and the cab filled with that warning chime. Thin, repetitive, irritating enough to raise the hair on your arms at 3 in the morning. I eased onto the shoulder outside Rawlins, Wyoming, with the trailer rumbling behind me and the crosswind worrying at the side of the rig. The interstate hissed in the dark. Not much traffic. A couple of semis blowing east, all marker lights and spray, then nothing again. I leaned across, shoved the passenger door harder, and listened for the proper metal click. There, the light died. The chime stopped. The cab went back to the low green glow of the gauges, and the soft, dry rattle that lived somewhere in the sleeper compartment whenever the road got rough. Probably a loose mug. Probably the plastic fan I kept clipped by the bunk. Probably nothing. Still, I sat there an extra moment with my hand on the wheel. There are nights when the road feels like work. There are nights when it feels like a tunnel that only pretends to have an ending. Then there are the thin, sleepless hours when one tiny thing goes wrong, and your mind starts building whole stories around it, most of them stupid. My name is Eli Mercer. I'm 38, and until 2 years ago, I would have told you I was good at ignoring stupid thoughts. That had been one of my better professional skills. I drove long-haul refrigerated freight out of Colorado, mostly produce, sometimes pharmaceuticals, sometimes boxed meat when dispatch got desperate, and the pay was right. I'd been on the road long enough to know every kind of bad coffee from Denver to Omaha, long enough to judge the quality of a truck stop shower by smell alone, long enough to tell from the tone of a dispatcher's voice whether a quick favor was going to cost me sleep, money, or both. That night, I was hauling a temperature-controlled load of packaged salad kits from Ogden to a grocery distribution center outside Des Moines, due the next afternoon if the weather held, and I didn't lose time at the way stations. The reefer unit hummed steadily behind me, a mechanical drone I usually stopped hearing after an hour. The cab smelled like burnt coffee, pine-scented air freshener, diesel caught in my jacket sleeves, and the peppermint gum I chewed when I got tired enough that I didn't trust my own blinking. I was divorced, though I still caught myself not saying it that way. Separated sounds temporary. Divorced sounds like a dropped plate. Final and loud. I had a 12-year-old daughter in Fort Collins named Avery, who liked astronomy and old horror movies, and had recently decided I was less embarrassing if I only texted her memes instead of asking real questions. I was also 6 months behind on being the kind of father I kept promising myself I'd become once things settled down, as if life had any interest in doing that for me. My private flaw, if you want the polished version, was avoidance. The uglier version was that I could let a problem sit untouched for so long it hardened into part of the room. I had done that with my marriage, with debts, with a voicemail on my phone I still hadn't deleted because hearing the first 2 seconds of it made my stomach go tight. I could haul 40,000 pounds through black ice and lane closures and construction squeezes without flinching. But give me one conversation I didn't want to have, and I'd reroute my whole life around it. The shoulder gravel spat under my tires as I pulled back onto I-80. The wind had dropped. Ahead, the highway ran in long black ribbons between low shapes of land I could barely see. Wyoming at night could make you feel like the last person left in the country. Fences, sage, distant red beacons on transmission towers, and every now and then a yellow sign catching your headlights like a warning from another planet. I clicked the CB on more out of habit than hope. Static, then a voice, scratchy and far off. One driver griping about chain restrictions somewhere west. Another guy laughed about a fuel island fight in Cheyenne. The ordinary music of men who would never know each other, but trusted each other enough to say, "Bear in the median at mile marker 213, left lane blocked by tire debris. Don't eat the chili at the Sinclair in Laramie." I kept it low. Around 3:30, my phone buzzed in its mount with a hands-free call from dispatch. The screen lit up with DANA. Dana Kessler, 52, female, was my overnight dispatcher out of Aurora. Smoked too much, swore with real creativity, and treated every driver like she'd personally violated him out of county jail once already, which, for a few of them, might actually have been true. She had a flat Midwestern voice and the patience of a mechanic with a stripped bolt. I hit accept. "You're alive." "Barely," Dana said. "You making time. Unless God personally closes Nebraska. He's been threatening it for years." Paper rustled on her end. Keyboard clicks. "Heads up. There's a nasty crosswind advisory past Laramie easing eastbound, and I need your fuel receipt uploaded when you stop next." I already did. "No, you photographed your knee by accident." I checked the app at a red light glow on the dash and saw she was right. A blurry kneecap, one corner of the steering wheel, no receipt. I said, "Is on the software." "That is on you being a fossil. Stop at the Petro near North Platte. Stretch your legs. And Mercer." "Yeah," a pause, "not work-related now." "Softer, you call your daughter back." I looked out at the road. "Been driving?" "That wasn't my question. You're a dispatcher. Try dispatching." Dana made a disgusted sound. "Every time I ask you a human question, you act like I'm violating policy." "Maybe you are. You got till sunup to stop being an idiot." Then she hung up. The cab went quiet again, except for tires, engine, the reefer, and the faint squeak from the bunk area that only happened when I thought about it too hard. I drove another 90 minutes through stretches of nothing broken by truck stop halos and isolated ranch lights. A deer flashed at the fence line once, frozen in my headlights before it bounded away. My coffee went cold. The heater worked too well on my feet and not well enough on my hands. I kept thinking about Avery's missed call from earlier that evening and not opening the voicemail that followed. At a rest area east of Sydney, I pulled in Ma from duty, clock, math, then fatigue. The place was one of those state-maintained lots that looked cleaner from a distance than up close. Vending machines humming behind glass. Sodium lights throwing a jaundiced shine over the pavement. Picnic tables no one used after dark. A line of parked trucks idling in uneven rhythm like a row of sleeping animals with bad lungs. I backed into a slot and cut the engine. The sudden reduction in noise made the reefer seem louder. Cold air leaked in around the door seals. Somewhere outside, a man coughed and spat onto concrete. Another truck's air brakes released with a violent sneeze. I climbed down, boots hitting asphalt that still held a little of the day's warmth underneath the night chill. My shoulders ached. My eyes had that gritty, overused feeling like there was sugar in them. Inside the rest building, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. The floor smelled of disinfectant over old urine, the way every highway restroom in America does, no matter how often they clean it. A vending machine compressor kicked on. A woman in a state maintenance jacket mopped near the sinks without looking at anybody. I bought a stale turkey sandwich and a black coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the Obama administration. When I came back out, there was someone standing near my truck. Not too close, not touching it, just standing near the passenger side front tire with a backpack at his feet and his hands shoved into the pockets of a dark canvas jacket. That by itself wasn't enough to spike the pulse. Plenty of people loiter around trucks. Smokers, drivers cutting across the lot. People who have made bad travel choices and are hoping to ask for directions, money, or a ride. But it was 4:30 in the morning, and he didn't have the loose, aimless posture of somebody waiting for a cigarette. He was watching the cab. I slowed without meaning to. He noticed me and stepped back immediately, palms showing a little, careful not to spook me. Good instinct. Mid-30s maybe. Lean, unshaven, knit cap pulled low. White. His face was narrow and tired, with the kind of cracked lips you get from too much cold wind and not enough water. There was a bruise yellowing along one side of his jaw. Not fresh. His backpack looked heavy, but cheap, the sort with one broken zipper pull replaced by a shoelace knot. "Sorry," he said. His voice had that rough morning edge. "Didn't mean to crowd your rig." I kept a few steps between us. "Then don't. Fair enough." I set my coffee on the metal step below the door and looked him over more directly. No obvious blood. No drunk sway. No aggressive angle to the shoulders. But people didn't wear warning labels. "Need something?" I asked. He glanced toward the interstate. "You heading east?" That was the question then. His name was Aaron Vale, 34, male. I got that a minute later, but I clocked him before I trusted the name. Dirt on the hem of his jeans, decent boots worn thin at the outer edges, wedding ring indentation without the ring, the kind of face that might have been handsome if it slept indoors more often. He smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and cold fabric, not booze. His right hand kept flexing once every few seconds like it ached. I don't pick people up. I should say that clearly. Most truckers don't anymore unless they're stupid, lonely, reckless, or some mixture that changes by the hour. Too many stories. Too many scams. Too many ways for a moment of pity to turn into police reports, lawsuits, broken noses, stolen wallets, accusations you can't easily disprove. Companies hate it. Insurance hates it more. Dashcams don't catch everything, and your word doesn't buy much once something ugly starts moving. So I said, "No." He nodded like he'd expected that. "Who's this town with a motel? Ogallala if you're lucky. North Platte if you're honest." He almost smiled. That far, that far." He looked past me at the truck, then back at me. "Phone died. guy I was riding with left me here after an argument. That your version? That's the version I'm offering strangers. The answer was dry enough that I almost respected it. Almost. I opened the door and climbed halfway in, enough to put some height between us. Try the highway patrol number inside. Already did, voicemail. At a rest area, he shrugged. Nebraska. There was a beat where the reefer throbbed behind us, and a loose plastic wrapper skidded over the asphalt in the wind. A driver 2 rows over laughed at something on his headset. Somewhere far out on the interstate, a horn gave one long lonely blast. Then Aaron said, "You still keeping that red flashlight in the driver's side door pocket?" My hand stopped on the grab handle. It was such a normal object, such a trucker object. Cheap flashlight, red casing, scuffed lens, nothing special. But he said it casually, like he'd noticed it before, like this was a conversation already in progress. I looked down into the cab. The flashlight was there, jammed between a road atlas and an old pair of gloves. When I looked back at him, he must have seen something shift in my face, because he straightened a little. "I'm not trying to scare you," he said. "Then you've made a poor start." "I know." He licked his lips once, eyes flicking to the restroom building, then to the empty dock beyond the lot. Not nervous exactly, measuring. "I just need to get east, and I think you need to hear something before sunrise." I stared at him. There are sentences that hit as nonsense. There are sentences that hit as threats. This one landed somewhere uglier because it sounded like a man talking about an appointment I didn't remember making. "You know me?" I asked. "Not personally." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now." I should have gotten back in the truck and locked the door. That is the smart version of events. Start engine. Roll. Call state patrol once I had signal and report a suspicious guy at the rest area saying weird things. Ordinary procedure. Ordinary survival. Instead, I stayed where I was. One boot on the step, one on the pavement, because the stupid human brain will ignore 90 sensible warnings if one impossible detail hooks into an old fear. He reached into his jacket slowly. I tensed. He stopped. "Wallet," he said. "Easy." He pulled out a flattened billfold and held up a driver's license between 2 fingers. Colorado issue. Aaron Matthew Vale. Colorado Springs address. The photo looked like him, just cleaner and with more color in his face. Not proof of anything except that some documents exist, but enough to complicate simple refusals. "Why me?" I said. He put the license away. "Because your route is predictable. Because you stop where you always stop when you're running late, but not too late. Because you don't like making calls when you're driving through western Nebraska." His eyes met mine then, and his voice lost the last of its dry humor. "And because if I'm not in that cab with you by the time the sun comes up, somebody else is going to get to you first." The air felt thinner. Not supernatural. Not magic. Not anything I couldn't, in theory, lay out on a table and explain. But explainable things can still wreck your life. I looked past him toward the lit rest building, where the maintenance woman was now dragging a trash bag out to the dumpster. Another driver was heading in, hood up, barely paying attention to either of us. My phone sat in the cup holder inside the cab. I could call Dana. I could call 911. I could leave. I could tell the stranger to get away from my truck and make enough noise that the whole lot looked over. Aaron lifted his backpack with one hand, not approaching, waiting. "Eli," he said quietly, and hearing my first name in his mouth made something small and hard turn over inside me. You need to decide. The sky in the east was still black, but it had started to look like black paper thinning at the edges. And there I was, balanced between the open cab door and the pavement, with bad coffee cooling by my boot, a refrigerated load on a deadline, a stranger who knew my name, and just enough time left before dawn to make the wrong choice for the right reason. I should have said no. That's the version of the story that keeps things simple, clean, predictable. Version where I climb into the cab, lock the doors, and let the diesel drown out whatever strange conversation almost started in that rest area. Instead, I stood there watching the sky thin at the edges and made the kind of decision I always make when something uncomfortable asks for my attention. I delayed. 5 minutes, I said. Aaron didn't move closer, didn't push it, just nodded once. That's all I need to get you started. That phrasing again. Not convinced, not reassured. Started. I climbed into the driver's seat and reached over to pop the passenger door open from the inside. It swung out with that same half-beat hesitation before catching properly this time. Aaron hauled his backpack up, stepped in, and shut the door behind him with a careful, deliberate motion like he didn't trust it either. Up close, the cold came in with him. Fabric and night air and stale smoke. He buckled the seatbelt without being told. Another point in his favor, or another detail someone had learned about me. I didn't ask him again if he knew me. I turned the key, let the engine come back to life, and pulled out of the rest area. We rolled back onto I-80 eastbound. The horizon had started to take on that faint gray-blue wash that promises morning without actually delivering it yet. The road stretched ahead, empty enough to feel staged. For a few miles, neither of us spoke. The cab settled into its usual rhythm, engine vibration through the seat, the low drone of the reefer, the occasional rattle from somewhere behind the curtain. My coffee sloshed in the cup holder. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. Aaron watched the road. You always take it slow merging back in, he said finally, even when there's no one there. I didn't look at him. You planning to narrate my driving, or are you going to explain why you're in my truck? He exhaled through his nose like he'd expected that tone. You ever check your trailer seal tonight? My grip tightened just enough that I noticed it. Of course I did, I said, before I left Ogden. At the last fuel stop. At the rest area, I didn't need to, you didn't, he said, not correcting, just stating. That small shift landed harder than it should have. Procedure matters in this job. It's not just company rules, it's protection. Seal intact, cargo untouched. Seal broken, you log it, report it. Cover your own liability before someone decides you're responsible for whatever's missing or added. I know my routine, I said. I know you think you do. I flicked my eyes toward the passenger mirror out of habit, then toward the long, dark stretch of trailer behind me. Everything looked normal. Marker light steady. No sway. No sign of tampering from this angle. That's your big warning, I said. You got in my cab to tell me I skipped a seal check. No. He shifted slightly in his seat, the fabric of his jacket scraping against the upholstery. I got in because somebody else didn't skip it. That sentence sat there heavy and quiet. I reached for the CB mic without taking my eyes off the road. Breaker 19 eastbound. Anybody just past the Sydney rest area? See anything off with a reefer trailer, white, swift unit, static. Then a voice crackled back, Bod. Negative, driver. All looks like all looks out here. Copy. I set the mic back. Aaron watched me do it. You trust that more than I trust you. That's fair. We drove another mile. The sky lightened another shade. The shapes of distant fields started to separate from the horizon. What exactly are you saying? I asked. I'm saying, he replied, slow and careful, that sometime between you parking at that rest area and you getting back in your truck, somebody had access to your trailer. I let out a short breath. You see them? No. Then how do you know? Because I know what they're doing. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got that doesn't get you killed faster. There it was again. Not dramatic, not shouted, just placed in the space between us like a tool I hadn't asked for. Killed. I focused on the lane lines sliding under the headlights. You throw that word around a lot, I said. I try not to waste it. Then start being useful. He nodded slightly, like I'd given him permission to continue. You're hauling produce, bagged kits, pre-washed, high volume, low margin, tight delivery windows. You read the placards. I read your route. That didn't answer the question. And, I said, and that kind of load, he continued, is easy to tamper with without anyone noticing until it hits the distribution center. You don't need to take anything. You just need to add something small in the right place. I felt the back of my neck tighten. Add what? He didn't answer right away. Aaron, I said, sharper now, if you're going to sit in my truck and play games, you can get out at the next exit. I'm not playing games, he said. I'm trying to get you to a scale or a checkpoint before you hit open daylight and become just another truck on the road. That's not how scales work. I don't get to just. You're going to have to, he cut in quietly. I looked at him then. His eyes weren't wild. They weren't dotting around. They were fixed, steady, tired in a way that didn't look like it came from lack of sleep. You said somebody else is going to get to me, I said. Who? He swallowed once. The people who set this up. And you're what? Their competitor, their conscience. I'm the guy who made a mistake getting involved with them in the first place. That tracked just enough to be dangerous. What kind of mistake? Kind where you think you're doing something small, he said, and then you realize it's connected to something a lot bigger. And by then, it's too late to walk away clean. I thought about the bruise on his jaw, the way his hand kept flexing, the way he'd been standing near my truck like he was waiting for a very specific person to come back. You picked the wrong trucker to confess to, I said. I didn't pick you, he replied. You were already picked. That hit harder than anything else he'd said. The reefer unit behind us shifted pitch slightly as the compressor cycled. A familiar sound, but in that moment, it felt like a change in pressure. I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over Dana's contact. You call her, Aaron said quietly, and you'll lose the window. You don't get to tell me who I call. No, he agreed. But I know what she'll say. She'll tell you to keep driving, make your delivery, report anything unusual through proper channels. And by the time anyone takes you seriously, whatever's in your trailer will already be where it's supposed to go. And where is that? He looked out at the road for a second, like he was measuring something in his head. A grocery distribution center, he said. Thousands of units. Stores across 3 states. You do the math. I didn't like where that math led. You're talking about contamination, I said. I'm talking about something worse than spoiled lettuce. My chest felt tight, but my voice stayed level. You don't get to drop that and then go vague. I'm not being vague, he said. I'm being careful. Careful doesn't help me. Careful keeps you from saying something out loud that puts you in a report somewhere you don't want to be. That was a different angle. Subtle, but there. You say the wrong thing, you become part of it. I hated how plausible that felt. "So what's the move?" I asked. "You wanted 5 minutes. You're in my truck. Give me something actionable." He nodded once, like he'd been waiting for that. "There's a way station coming up before North Platte," he said. "Not always open this early, but sometimes they run random checks. If it's open, you pull in. You tell them you need a seal inspection. You make it sound routine. And if it's closed, then we find another way to get eyes on that trailer before anyone else does." I repeated. "You can't do it alone," he said. "Not if what I think is in there is actually in there." I let that sit. The sun still hadn't broken the horizon, but the world was starting to take shape in gray and muted brown. Fields, fences, the occasional farmhouse set back from the road, a billboard promising cheap fireworks at the next exit. Everything looked normal, too normal. "And why do you care?" I asked. "You could have kept walking, hitched a ride with someone else, stayed out of it." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I tried that, didn't take. Meaning they're already looking for me," he said. "And if they find me without having fixed this, I'm not useful to them anymore." "So you're using me?" "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "And I'm also trying to keep you from getting dragged into something you don't understand. That ship sailed when you said my name." "Fair." We drove in silence again. The next exit sign flashed by. A few more trucks appeared ahead, their taillights red dots in the growing light. The world was waking up whether I wanted it to or not. I thought about Avery's voicemail, about Dana telling me to stop being an idiot, about the way I'd been able to ignore things for months, years, until they became part of the background. This wasn't background. This was something I either dealt with now or regretted later. Avoidance wasn't going to carry me through this one. Up ahead, a green sign loomed into clarity. "Way Station 2, MILES." Aaron leaned forward slightly, not enough to crowd me, just enough to show he'd seen it too. "Okay," he said, "this is it." My eyes flicked to the digital board mounted above the shoulder lane. It came into view, closed just one word, glowing dull amber against the morning. I felt something drop in my gut. "Of course it is," I muttered. Aaron sat back slowly. "That complicates things," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "That's one way to put it." I eased off the throttle a fraction, thinking, recalculating. There were other options. Truck stops, calling it in, pulling over somewhere public and breaking the seal myself. "No," Aaron said suddenly. I looked at him. "No what? Don't pull over," he said. His voice had changed, sharper now. Urgent in a way it hadn't been before. "Why?" He was looking past me, into the side mirror. "Because you're not the only one who noticed that station was closed." A cold, practical instinct kicked in. Checked the mirror. A dark pickup had come up behind us at some point, close enough that its headlights filled the lower edge of the trailer. Not unusual on its own. People draft trucks all the time, especially in open stretches like this. But it hadn't passed. It sat there, matching speed, too close, too steady. "How long has he been there?" I asked. Aaron didn't answer right away. "Long enough," he said. I adjusted the cruise slightly, easing up a couple of miles per hour. The pickup stayed with me. I sped back up, still there. No attempt to pass, no drift, just locked in behind my trailer like it had a reason to be exactly where it was. My mouth felt dry. "Tell me that's coincidence," I said. Aaron didn't. "That's them," he said quietly. The pickup didn't flash its lights, didn't honk, didn't do anything that would get it noticed. It just stayed there. Same distance, same speed, like it had found the exact spot in the world where it needed to exist and decided not to move from it. I watched it in the mirror long enough that my eyes started to burn. "Don't stare," Aaron said quietly. "You'll start reacting to them without meaning to." "I'm already reacting," I said. "Yeah," he replied, "but you're still driving straight." I forced my focus back onto the road. The sky had shifted from black to that thin, early gray that makes everything look flatter than it is. The interstate ran ahead in a gentle curve, cutting through open farmland dotted with low fences and the occasional cluster of trees. We were closing in on North Platte. More traffic now, a few cars, another semi passing westbound. Normal movement, normal life. It should have made me feel safer. It didn't. "What's the plan?" I asked. Aaron rubbed his thumb along the edge of his palm, a small, repetitive motion. "We need eyes on the trailer." "You said not to pull over." "I said not to pull over alone." I thought about that. Truck stop. Too crowded, too open. If they're behind us, they'll just sit back and watch. Better than this. Not if they're waiting for you to make a mistake. That hit close enough to sting. I adjusted my speed again. Slowed slightly. The pickup slowed. I sped up. It matched me. "They're pacing us," I said. "Yeah, you sure it's them?" "No," he said, "but I'm sure enough." That was almost worse. The sign for a rest area outside North Platte came into view, green against the pale sky. "Rest area," I said, "in and out." I park near the front, lights on. You check the seal while I keep the engine running. Aaron shook his head. "Too exposed. We're already exposed." He didn't argue that. We passed the sign. I signaled anyway. "Eli, I'm not driving blind with a maybe in my trailer," I snapped. "I need to see it." The rig drifted onto the exit ramp, the trailer swaying slightly as I slowed. Gravel crunched under the tires as we pulled into the lot. It was bigger than the last one, more open, more light. A handful of cars, 2 other trucks idling at the far end. I angled the rig so the trailer was visible from the cab and stopped near a light pole. The pickup rolled past the entrance, didn't turn in. It kept going. For a second, relief came in sharp and fast. "See," I said. "Probably nothing." Aaron didn't relax. "They didn't need to follow us in," he said. "They know where we are." I killed the parking brake and left the engine running. "Out," I said. We both stepped down. The cold hit harder now that the sun was starting to rise, that strange in-between temperature where your body can't decide if it's warming up or cooling down. I grabbed the red flashlight from the door pocket. "You weren't kidding about that," Aaron said. "Stay focused." We moved along the side of the trailer, boots echoing hollow against the asphalt. The reefer unit hummed louder back here, a steady mechanical heartbeat. The seal was at the rear doors. I swung the flashlight beam up. The metal latch gleamed dull under the light. The plastic seal was gone. There was a piece of it still looped through one side, snapped clean through, the other half missing entirely. My stomach dropped. "Damn it," I said under my breath. Aaron stepped closer, not touching anything. "Yeah." Scanned the hinges, the edges of the doors. No obvious damage. No fast entry marks beyond the broken seal. "They opened it," I said. "Yeah, recently. Has to be, that wouldn't just fall apart on its own." I swallowed. My mouth felt dry again. "Open it," I said. Aaron hesitated. "You sure?" "No," I said. "But I'm not driving another mile without knowing." He nodded once. I pulled the latch. The metal groaned slightly, stiff from cold and use. The doors cracked open a few inches. Cold air rolled out. Sharper than the morning air, controlled, artificial. The smell hit next. Not rot, not chemical, just produce, lettuce, dressing packets, plastic. Normal. I opened the doors wider. Rows of boxes stacked neatly on pallets, wrapped in clear plastic. Everything looked exactly the way it should. "Looks fine," I said, though my voice didn't sound convinced. Aaron climbed halfway in, careful not to step on anything loose. He swept his eyes over the stacks. "Wouldn't make it obvious," he said. "Then what am I looking for?" "Tampered pallets, boxes that have been opened and resealed, anything out of place." I climbed up beside him, the cold biting through my jacket. We moved down the narrow space between stacks, flashlight beam cutting through the dim interior. Everything looked normal, too normal. "Maybe you're wrong," I said. "I hope I am." I stopped at one of the middle pallets. "Here," I said, "this wrap." It looked slightly uneven. Not torn, just less tight than the others. Aaron crouched, inspecting it. "Yeah, that's been handled. Open it." He glanced at me. "You want to be the one explaining this to your company?" "I'll explain worse if I don't." He nodded and pulled at the plastic wrap, peeling it back just enough to expose the top layer of boxes. He opened one. Inside, sealed salad kits. Intact. Labels correct. He checked another. Same. A third. Same. I felt a flicker of something close to relief. "Maybe it's nothing," I said again. Aaron didn't answer. He reached deeper into the pallet, pulling one box from the middle. That one, the tape was different. Subtle, slightly darker, different brand. He opened it. Inside, the bags looked the same at first glance. Same branding, same packaging. Then he lifted one. It was heavier, not by much, but enough. He squeezed it gently. The contents shifted wrong. Not crisp lettuce, something denser. "What is that?" I asked. Aaron didn't answer immediately. He set the bag down carefully, like it might react if handled wrong. "They're using the packaging," he said finally. "Swapping contents, distributing something undercover of normal product." "What's something?" "I don't know," he said. "Could be drugs, could be something worse." "Worse how?" He looked at me. "Something that doesn't get caught until it's already been shipped out." That thought hit hard. Thousands of units. Stars across states. People. "Jesus," I muttered. A sound cut through the moment. A sharp metallic bang from outside. Both of us froze. Another bang. Closer. I moved to the edge of the trailer and looked out. A man was walking past the truck, dragging something metal, one of those portable trash bins, across the asphalt. It rattled loudly every time it hit a crack. He didn't even glance at us, just kept going. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Aaron exhaled too. "Okay." "Yeah," I said. "Okay." The adrenaline didn't fully fade, though. It lingered, leaving my hands slightly unsteady. "That's what this does," Aaron said quietly. "Makes every noise feel like it's about to be something else." No kidding. We climbed back down from the trailer. "What now?" I asked. "We can't deliver this," he said. "No," I agreed. "We can't. But we also can't just call it in and sit here." "Why not?" "Because if they're tracking the load, the moment you stop moving and make noise, they'll escalate." I thought about the pickup, about how it had just kept going. "They already know," I said. "Maybe," he said, "but we don't know how closely." I rubbed my face, feeling the grit in my eyes, the tension building behind them. "I need options," I said. "Closest secure facility is probably a dot yard or a state patrol station," he said. "But that's going to take time, and you'll be on the road to get there. And they'll be on us again." "Yeah," I looked back at the trailer. "What if we take the compromised boxes out?" I said. "Dump them. Get rid of whatever they put in there." Aaron shook his head immediately. "No, why not?" "Because we don't know what it is," he said. "You start ripping those open in a public rest area, you could make things worse fast." That was fair. I hated that it was fair. So what then? I asked. We just keep driving with this in the back. We drive somewhere controlled, he said. Somewhere with cameras, with people, where they can't just approach you without being seen. Truck stop, I said again. Bigger than that. Where? He hesitated. That was new. Where? I pressed. There's a facility, he said slowly. Private. Logistics yard, not far off the interstate. Whose facility? He looked at me. That's the problem, he said. It might be theirs. I stared at him. You're kidding. I wish I was. So your plan, I said, my voice rising despite myself, is to drive directly into the place that might be run by the people who put whatever that is in my trailer. It's the only place I know for sure is connected to this, he said, which means it's the only place we might get answers. That's not a plan, I snapped. That's walking into a trap. Eli, he said, more firmly now, we're already in it. That hung there, heavy, uncomfortable, true in a way I didn't want to admit. I thought about turning around, about heading back west, about ditching the load somewhere remote and disappearing from the whole situation. But that wasn't real. They had my truck number, my route, maybe more. Running didn't erase that. Avoiding it didn't erase that. The sky had fully shifted now, pale blue edging into the horizon, the world waking up, time moving forward whether I was ready or not. I looked at the interstate, then at Aaron. Where is it? I asked. He gave me directions. Exit number, a county road, a turnoff that wouldn't show up unless you knew to look for it. I listened, memorized, didn't like it. Once we go there, I said, we don't get to pretend this didn't happen. No, he said, no backing out. No, I nodded slowly. That feeling settled in my chest again. Not panic, not quite fear, something more final. I climbed back into the cab. Aaron followed. I pulled out of the rest area, back onto the interstate. For a few minutes, the road ahead was clear. Then, in the mirror, the pickup was back. Closer this time. We took exit 177 just east of North Platte. Not a dramatic turn. No screeching tires. No movie nonsense. Just a long-haul rig easing off the interstate onto a frontage road, while morning spread thin and cold across western Nebraska. On the map in my head, we had left the clean logic of the highway and entered the kind of land where things could happen without witnesses. Flat fields, drainage ditches, a line of cottonwoods in the distance, grain bins, low industrial sheds set back from county roads. The pickup stayed behind us through the exit, then dropped back far enough that I could only see it intermittently when the road bent. Aaron sat rigid in the passenger seat, one hand on his thigh, the other braced against the dash whenever I took a corner too fast. 2 miles, he said, then left at the feedlot. Still think this is a good idea? No, he said. I think it's the only one left. That honesty would have been refreshing in another situation. I drove with one eye on the road and one on the mirrors. My shoulders ached from tension. My lower back felt like a hot wire. The inside of my mouth tasted sour from coffee and adrenaline, and not eating the stale sandwich I'd bought hours earlier. I kept thinking about the altered package in the trailer, the give of it under Aaron's hand, the wrong weight, drugs, maybe, fentanyl, meth, whatever people moved when they wanted to ride under something boring and legitimate. Or maybe worse. The county road narrowed after the feedlot, patched asphalt with crumbling edges, and no shoulder worth trusting with 80,000 pounds. A drainage canal ran alongside us for half a mile, black water, with a skim of dawn light on it. Then, A gravel spur road branched off to the south, marked only by a small sun-faded sign, half hidden by weeds. Midwest TINSLOAD services, no logo. No dot pride, just block letters. That's it, Aaron said. There was a gate ahead, open. Beyond it sat a spread of low warehouse buildings, a couple of reefer trailers backed into bays, 2 box trucks, a fuel tank, a prefab office, and a larger metal barn at the far end. Security cameras on poles, chain link fencing on 3 sides. The fourth side dropped toward the canal and a line of scrub. No obvious activity. No workers in sight. Too quiet for a weekday morning. I slowed but didn't stop. Looks dead, I said. It won't be, Aaron replied. The pickup turned onto the gravel behind us. That settled it. I took the rig through the gate. The gravel crunched loud under the tires. My trailer rocked. Dust rose in the mirrors. I pulled toward the center of the yard, not too near the loading bays, not too close to any building where someone could box me in completely without effort. Open enough to maneuver. Not open enough. Then what? I asked. Aaron's eyes were scanning everything. Office door, camera poles, bay numbers. Then we make them show themselves. That's your plan. It's the part I have. The pickup came through the gate and stopped near it, angled sideways like it was keeping the exit available for itself and complicated for us. Dark blue, not black. Ford F-150, older model. Mud on the panels. 2 men inside. One got out first. He was big without being fat. Maybe late 40s, white, work jacket, ball cap. A face worn blunt by weather and bad decisions. He moved like a man used to people backing up when he kept walking. The second man got out more slowly from the passenger side, thinner, younger, shaved head, gray hoodie under puffer vest. He held one hand low by his thigh. Could have been a phone, could have been nothing good. Do not get out, Aaron said. Wasn't planning to. Larger man stopped 20 feet from the truck and lifted both hands, palms out. Friendly posture. Fake friendly, you can always tell. Real friendly people don't arrange themselves around your blind spots. I cracked the driver's window 2 inches. Morning, he called. His voice carried across the yard too easily. Morning, I said. He squinted up at the cab. Looks like you took a wrong turn, driver. Looks like a logistics yard, I replied. He smiled, not with his eyes. Private one. Aaron leaned toward my side without putting his face in the window gap. That's Deke. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Aaron said it did. Deke looked toward the passenger side, saw enough movement to register somebody else was in the cab, and the smile flattened. There you are, he said, louder now. Thought you were smarter than this, Aaron. Aaron didn't answer. My heart was going too fast, but my hands were steady. Years of bad weather had at least given me that much. What do you want? I asked. Deke kept his gaze on Aaron even while speaking to me. Simple mix-up. Guy in your passenger seat belongs somewhere else, and you've got freight that doesn't. You let him out, we sought it out, and you go on having yourself a legal, uneventful day. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, trailer got opened. He made a tiny shrug. These things happen. Seal got broken. Then you report it. Aaron spoke for the first time. He knows what's in there. Deke looked back at the cab window. His expression didn't change much. That was somehow worse. No, he said. He knows enough to make his morning difficult. That's not the same thing. The thinner man by the pickup had moved a few steps without me noticing. Angle tightening. Exit line shortening. I eased the truck into neutral and kept my foot near the brake. What's in the packages? I asked. Deke smiled again, smaller this time. Something worth a lot of trouble. Something you don't want in your life, Eli. Hearing my name from him put a cold current through me. There it was, the thing Aaron had been circling. You know me too, I said. Know enough, Deke replied. Fought Collins' daughter. Dispatcher who thinks you're more reliable than you are. A voicemail you haven't listened to yet. The world narrowed for a second. Just the wheel under my hands. The 2-inch window gap. Aaron breathing beside me. The low rumble of the idling engine. It is a terrible thing when a stranger touches the softest part of your life with clean fingers. I said nothing. Deke took that as permission to continue. You're a practical man, Eli. That's why you're going to hand Aaron over and back your trailer into Bay 3. We'll swap a few pallets, fix the paperwork issue, replace your seal, and you'll make Des Moines only a little late. Maybe you tell your dispatcher there was traffic. Maybe weather. Men like you are always explaining weather. Aaron was already shaking his head. Don't listen to him. No, Deke said mildly. He should listen very carefully. The thin guy lifted his hand. Phone, after all. He pointed it at us like he was filming. I understood then, not fully, enough. Leverage, evidence, edited stories. Trucker with tampered load. Hitchhiker in the cab. Maybe drugs. Maybe conspiracy. Maybe a picture sent to the right supervisor, insurer, cop, or ex-wife. Men like Deke didn't need perfect facts. Just enough mess. I'm calling Highway Patrol, I said. Deke's smile vanished. You can. And then you can explain why you entered private property with compromised freight and an admitted accomplice. You can explain why you didn't report it hours ago. You can explain why your route changed. Maybe they believe you. Maybe they don't. Meanwhile, your girl's school gets an interesting call about her dad. Aaron swore under his breath. That did it. Not the threat to me, not my job. Avery. Private fear, flaw, weakness, call it what you want. Mine had always been that if I let one bad thing into my life, it would eventually crawl through every door and under every bed until it reached my daughter. That the parts of me I kept separate were never really separate at all. I should have dealt with hard things early. I should have listened to the voicemail. I should have called her back. I should have. None of that helped now. I looked at the yard again. Bay 3 to my right. Office ahead left. Fuel tank. Camera poles. The larger metal barn beyond the warehouse. Gravel deep enough to reduce speed. Pickup near gate. And the canal behind the far fence line. An idea came together ugly and fast. Aaron, I said quietly, not looking at him. That hand of yours still work. He understood I was asking about pain, not guilt. Enough. When I move, you call Dana from my phone. Speaker off. Tell her exact location. Tell her compromised freight, armed threat if you see one. And tell her to notify State Patrol and the company's emergency line. No details beyond that. They'll hear. Not if they're busy. Deke took a step closer to the door. Decision time, Eli. He was right. It was. I put the truck in gear. Slowly, deliberately. Deke's face shifted a fraction. He thought I was complying. Good man, he said, stepping aside and gesturing toward Bay 3. I nodded once. Then I turned the wheel hard left and stomped the accelerator. A loaded reefer does not leap. It commits. The tractor lunged, gravel spraying from the drives, trailer swinging wide behind. Deke jumped back with a shout. The thin guy stumbled sideways, dropping the phone. I aimed not at them, but at the open space between the office and the first camera pole, cutting across the yard in a way no sane driver would unless sanity had become a luxury. Aaron grabbed the dash and cursed. The truck slammed through a stack of empty pallets with a crack like gunfire. Wood exploded. I clipped the camera pole hard enough to fold it halfway over. Sparks spit near the base. The office door burst open, and a third man came out, then vanished back inside as he saw 20 tons of bad intent sliding his way. The pickup revved behind us. "Call," I shouted. Aaron was already fumbling my phone from the cup holder. I yanked the wheel right, trying to swing the trailer broadside between the warehouse and the gate. Not to escape, not yet. To block the yard. To make clean movement harder for everyone. The trailer followed a half-second later with a violent shove through the cab. I heard metal scream as the rear corner struck something fixed. Bay frame, maybe. It didn't matter. What mattered was where we ended up. Tractor angled toward the far fence, trailer jackknifed enough to choke most of the open yard and leave the pickup with only a narrow, ugly path. Not impossible. Ugly was all I had. The pickup accelerated anyway, trying to thread through. I saw the move coming and dumped the clutch just enough to drag the trailer another foot across the gravel. The gap vanished. The pickup braked too late and clipped the trailer's rear ICC bumper with a brutal crunch. Hood buckling. Radiator hiss. Not disabled, maybe, but hurt. My seatbelt locked across my chest. Aaron had Dana on the line now, voice low and fast. "This is Eli Mercer's truck, Midwest Transload Services off I-80 near North Platte, compromised refrigerated freight. Men are trying to intercept. No, listen to me." A sharp crack split the air. Not thunder, not a tire, gunshot. The windshield starred on the passenger side. Aaron jerked back with a choked sound and dropped the phone. For one blank, white second, I thought he'd been hit in the head. Then I saw blood on his sleeve, not his face. Upper arm, through and through maybe. Maybe a graze. I didn't know. He clamped his hand over it, breathing too fast. Outside, the thin guy had a handgun now. Small, black, held badly, but not so badly that it mattered at this distance. No plot armor. No cinematic misses. Just a bullet through safety glass and flesh. I ducked low and shoved my door open. "Move," I yelled. Aaron was pale but conscious. "Phone, forget the phone." Another shot cracked. Metal pinged somewhere behind us. I grabbed the red flashlight from the door pocket on pure reflex and came out low, boots sliding in gravel. The air smelled suddenly of coolant, diesel, and the hot bitter tang of gunfire. My ears rang. I rounded the front of the cab, using the engine block as cover. Deke was shouting at the thin guy. Couldn't make out words. The third man from the office had appeared near the warehouse corner, holding something long, bolt cutters maybe a pry bar. Aaron stumbled out the passenger side and crouched behind the step, one hand pressed to his bleeding arm. The phone lay in the gravel under the cab, screen lit, Dana still connected. Tinny voice calling my name. The thin guy moved for a better angle. I snatched up a fist-sized chunk of broken pallet from the ground and threw it hard toward the pickup's damaged front end. It hit metal with a bang, not useful in itself, except that his eyes snapped there for half a second. Half a second is real time. I ran for the fuel tank, not because I wanted an explosion. Real life doesn't work that way, because it was a big steel cylinder on concrete blocks with enough bulk to hide behind and enough hoses and valves around it to complicate anybody charging past. Another shot hit gravel near my right foot and spat stones into my boot. I nearly fell, caught myself on the tank ladder, and felt pain lance up my left knee. Behind me, the reefer unit changed pitch, then cut out entirely. I looked back. The rear corner of my trailer, the part that had hit the bay frame, had torn into the reefer housing wiring. The unit was dead, cold chain broken, cargo clock started. Not the worst problem in the yard, but very much a real one. Aaron had seen it too. He gave me a look that contained an entire doomed spreadsheet. Deke was trying to flank us around the nose of the truck, while the armed man held our side pinned. "Eli," Aaron shouted. "The canal," I turned. Beyond the far fence, 20 yards away, the drainage canal ran parallel to the property. The chain link wasn't topped with barbed wire there. Maybe because they didn't think anyone with sense would choose mud and water over road. Maybe they were right. The fence line was reachable if we crossed open gravel with 2 men between us and it. The truck was no longer a refuge. Windshield compromised, Aaron shot, reefer dead, yard blocked, phone possibly still live, but not in hand. Even if patrol was coming, it wouldn't be here in seconds. Point of no return had arrived without asking. I flashed the red light once toward Aaron, not as a signal exactly, more to catch his eye, then pointed at the pickup's busted radiator. Coolant had begun pooling under it, steam rising, engine unhappy. He understood faster than I expected. He tore the bloody sleeve of his jacket with his teeth, wrapped his arm once tight, then grabbed a fistful of gravel with his good hand. I moved first, sprinting from the tank toward the pickup's blind side. The thin guy fired and missed wide. Aaron came up from behind the truck step and flung the gravel at his face. Stupid move, primitive move, effective move. He flinched, turned, and Aaron slammed the passenger door of the cab into him with all the force he had left. The man went down hard, gun skidding under the trailer. Deke lunged for Aaron. I met him halfway with the red flashlight clenched in my fist. It was cheap plastic over metal car, heavier than it looked. I swung once and hit him across the temple. Not a heroic knockout. Real people don't fold neatly. He staggered, grabbed me, and we both went down in the gravel. He was stronger than me. Older strength, work strength. He smelled like tobacco and cold sweat. He drove a forearm into my throat and hissed, "You should have delivered the load." I jammed my thumb into the bruise Aaron already put on his jaw hours or days before I didn't know, didn't care, and his weight shifted just enough for me to buck him sideways. We rolled. My knee screamed. He got a fist into my ribs that made my vision spark. Then Aaron kicked him in the head. Not clean, not elegant. Boot to ear while half fainting from blood loss. But enough. Deke slumped. "Move," Aaron gasped. The third man from the warehouse was running now. We ran too, across the yard, past the folded camera pole, past the shredded pallets and leaking pickup and my jackknifed truck that had been my whole world 3 hours earlier. Gravel slipped under our boots. My chest burned. Aaron was making a sound through his teeth every few steps. The fence hit us like the end of a sentence. Chain link, 6 feet, easy in theory. Different when you're exhausted and injured and someone is behind you. I shoved Aaron upward first. He got 1 foot in the wire, then the other, climbed awkwardly with one usable arm. The third man was close enough that I could hear his breathing. I snatched the red flashlight again from my pocket and threw it as hard as I could. It struck him square in the face. He folded over with both hands to his nose. Aaron got over the top and dropped badly to the other side, with a cry that made me think he'd broken something else. I climbed after him, slower than I should have, my knee shaking, ribs protesting. Halfway up, I heard Deke shouting again. Back on his feet. I went over anyway. The far side was a muddy bank down into black canal water lined with cattails and broken concrete riprap. Aaron slid and disappeared to the shin in mud. I landed wrong, pain blowing white through my left leg, and nearly went into the water with him. We kept moving along the canal because there was nothing else to do. Behind us, men hit the fence. Ahead, a county road crossed the canal on a low bridge maybe a quarter-mile east. Too far, maybe possible. Then, faint at first, but growing fast, I heard sirens. Real ones. Not sudden saviors dropping from the sky. Just the slow, messy consequence of a call getting through, and people finally putting coordinates to panic. Deke heard them too. That changed the yard behind us. Otters barked, movement reversing. Men deciding which disaster was more survivable. Police reports of us. We collapsed under the bridge 10 minutes later, maybe less, maybe more. Time had gone rubbery. Aaron sat in the dirt with his back to the concrete abutment, his injured arm slick with blood, despite the makeshift wrap. My ribs hurt when I breathed. My knee was swelling visibly under my jeans. Somewhere back up the canal road, doors slammed, engines revved. A siren chopped the morning air into pieces. I found my phone in my pocket and stared at it stupidly before remembering I had picked it up from the gravel without thinking while we ran. The call to Dana had ended. There were 3 missed calls from her now, and 1 unheard voicemail from Avery. Aaron saw me looking at the screen. "You should listen to it," he said. I laughed once, then winced because my ribs didn't appreciate it. "Now, assuming we get more nows," he said. We sat there in the smell of mud and cold water and blood, while sirens multiplied somewhere beyond the rise. I hit play. Avery's voice came on thin and small through the speaker, trying hard to sound casual. "Hey, Dad. Mom said not to bother you if you were driving, but I just wanted to say I got the part in the planetarium thing. The live show won. I'm Mars." A little laugh. Which is funny, because apparently I'm a war planet. "Anyway, call me when you stop. You always say you will, so do it this time, okay?" Static, breath, and don't forget next Friday. Then the message ended. I sat very still. Around us, the world kept moving. Sirens, wind through dry grass, the distant idle of my ruined truck, all of it continuing with no interest in whether I had finally heard what I should have heard hours ago. Aaron leaned his head back against the concrete and closed his eyes. "You okay?" "No," I said. It was the first honest answer I'd given all night. And in the canal stink under that bridge, with my freight spoiled, my truck wrecked, a man bleeding beside me, and whatever came next already on its way. The worst part was knowing the secret I'd been most careful with wasn't hidden from danger after all. It had just been neglected. By the time the first state trooper got to us under the bridge, Aaron had stopped trying to act tough about the blood. That was how I knew he was worse than he'd wanted me to think. Up until then, he'd been doing what men like us do when there isn't a clean alternative. Pressing his palm harder into the wound, breathing through his teeth, answering in short, practical sentences, like if he kept the information useful enough nobody would notice he was going gray around the mouth. Then the sirens got close. Blue light flickered off the canal water and the concrete underside of the bridge. Gravel crunched overhead. Somebody shouted, State Patrol, and Aaron sagged sideways against the embankment with a sound I still hear sometimes when I wake up too fast. "Here," I yelled, louder than my ribs liked. "Down here." The trooper who climbed down first was young, maybe late 20s. Face set in that careful, neutral expression cops use when they don't yet know if the bleeding people in front of them are victims, liars, or both. He had his weapon drawn at first. He lowered it when he saw Aaron's arm and my knee and the way we were both breathing. "Hands where I can see them," he said anyway. Fair enough. I put mine up. My left side cramped so hard I nearly folded. Aaron lifted one hand off the wound and immediately put it back, swearing. Then things became procedural very fast. More officers, more voices, a deputy from the county sheriff's office, 2 EMTs ducking under the bridge with a jump bag and a stretcher that looked impossible to maneuver down there until they did it anyway, because people who do hard jobs for long enough stop pausing to admire the difficulty. They cut Aaron's sleeve open. He hissed once, sharply, then shut up. One of the EMTs, a woman with dark hair tucked into a knit cap, packed the wound while asking him a stream of calm questions about allergies, consciousness, pain level, dizziness. He answered most of them, missed a few. His eyes kept sliding shut. Another medic looked at my knee, prodded my ribs, asked if I'd lost consciousness. "No, you sure?" "No," I said, "but probably not." He gave me that look medical people give when they've already decided you're going to be difficult. Getting checked anyway. Up above us, through the gaps in the bridge rail, I could see fragments of the yard situation continuing. Flashing lights, movement around my truck, the pickup still crooked near the gate, men in reflective vests from somewhere official, the whole scene acquiring the ugly geometry of evidence. A trooper crouched beside me with a small notebook and the kind of face that didn't invite jokes. "Name," I gave it. He asked what happened. I looked at him, then at Aaron on the stretcher, then at my truck, visible in pieces between concrete supports and dry grass. I said, "Long version or useful version?" "Useful first." So I gave him useful. Tampered trailer seal, compromised load, private yard, threats, gunfire, attempt to force me to back into Bay 3, escape through the fence, Aaron's warning, Dana's call. I kept it stripped down and chronological, the way you describe an accident to insurance when you know too many adjectives make people suspicious. The trooper wrote, didn't nod much, didn't give me anything. When I finished, he asked, "And the male with you, Aaron Vale, relationship? Met him 4 hours ago." That got the smallest pause. "You picked up a hitchhiker?" "Yes, you usually do that." "No." Why this time? I thought about giving him the easiest possible answer. Because he looked scared. Because I was tired. Because it was dark and I made a bad call. All of that was true. None of it was the truth. He knew my name, I said, and details he shouldn't have known. The trooper's pen stopped for half a second, then resumed. "What kind of details?" I almost said my secrets. Instead I said personal ones. That was how the morning went from there. Questions, repetition, clarification. A legal pad balanced on a trooper's thigh. Another officer taking photos of my injuries. A county detective arriving in an unmarked SUV with his tie already loosened like he knew this day was going to be long. They loaded Aaron first. He caught my sleeve as they lifted the stretcher. "Don't let them sanitize it," he said. He was drifting, but his voice was still his. Dry, bitter, intent. I wasn't planning to. His hand slipped off my jacket. They carried him up the bank. I went in the second ambulance, mostly because my knee had swollen enough that standing was becoming a theory rather than a fact. The medic strapped me in, taped a small gauze pad over the cut on my forehead I hadn't known was there, and told me I might have cracked ribs. Might have, I said. You want certainty, go to church, he replied. The hospital in North Platte was smaller than the ones in Denver, but busy in the particular way regional hospitals are busy: farm injuries, chest pain, a kid with a split chin, an old man coughing into a towel, while daytime television murmured from a wall mount no one was really watching. They took Aaron to surgery after imaging showed the bullet had gone clean through soft tissue in the upper arm without hitting bone, which in another context would have counted as lucky. He'd also torn something in his shoulder climbing or falling, and his blood loss was enough that the surgeon wanted to be careful. That was how it was explained to me later, by a nurse whose badge read KSBNGLER and whose entire face communicated that she had no interest in dramatic men making her shift worse. For me, it was simpler. 2 bruised ribs, 1 hairline fracture higher up, sprained left knee with a partial ligament tear, and enough swelling to earn a brace. Cuts, contusions, mild concussion symptoms not excluded, which sounded to me like medicine's version of shrugging. Then came the legal part. It followed the medical part room to room like a smell. A state investigator interviewed me before I'd even finished the second cup of terrible hospital coffee. Then a man from my company's risk department called. Then Dana, who did not start with hello. You absolute moron, she said, voice shaking hard enough to sand the edges off the insult. You have any idea I'm okay? Are you? No, I admitted. That slowed her down. Not much enough. I could hear keyboard clatter behind her, phones ringing, dispatch life continuing because freight does not pause for trauma. The company has already impounded the truck, she said. Or whatever version of that word applies. They've got legal involved. Dot wants logs, fuel receipts, route deviations, ELD records, trailer temp history, all of it. Yeah, and MRSA. Yeah. You did right by not delivering. I leaned back against the hospital bed. Every inch of me saw. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. But it did. Thanks. A pause, then softer. You listened to your daughter's voicemail. Yeah, good. I waited for her to say more. She didn't. She didn't need to. By afternoon, I'd given the same story 5 times in slightly different language. Aaron had given his too, once he was stable enough, and between us, plus what they found in the trailer. And at the yard, the shape of the thing started to emerge. Not all of it. Enough. The altered salad bags contained vacuum-sealed packets of fentanyl pressed into thin, flat packages that could ride inside retail product with very little change in outward appearance if you knew how to handle the weights and box placement. Not contamination in the poison the food sense I'd feared, which was its own kind of relief and its own different horror. It wasn't meant for accidental consumption. It was meant to move bulk narcotics through legitimate refrigerated distribution without attracting the usual heat. Midwest Transload Services was a shell operation, real enough on paper to pass a glance, fake enough in practice to route selected loads through specific hands. Deke was not the top of it, not even close. Just a yard boss with a talent for intimidation and just enough access to make people under him feel untouchable. 2 men were arrested at the site, One was Deke. The other was the younger guy with the handgun, whose real bravery seemed to end once uniforms outnumbered him. The third man made it out the back side of the property before the first units fully locked it down. They found blood on the gravel where I'd hit Deke, and a busted camera pole, and my ruined reefer, and the pickup with its radiator leaking into the dust. They found paperwork in the office, burner phones, seal cutters, Ray boxing supplies, enough to make the local news that night and enough, the detective told me, to make a larger agency take an interest, but not enough to feel finished. That part came later. First came Avery. Lena, my ex-wife, 41, female, a middle school science teacher with the patience of a saint, until she ran out of it all at once, drove down from Fort Collins the next day with Avery in the passenger seat, and a face that told me I should be grateful she hadn't killed me herself en route. Lena entered the hospital room first. She stood at the foot of the bed, taking in the brace, the bruises, the hospital wristband, the stale crackers, the paper cup of water. "You look terrible," she said. "I've looked worse." "No," she replied. "You've looked more self-inflicted. This is different." That was Lena, never sentimental when accuracy would do. Avery came in behind her wearing a hoodie with constellations printed across the sleeves. She stopped when she saw me, and the expression on her face was the one thing from that whole week I would undo if I could. Not fear exactly, recognition. Like this was another entry in a pattern she'd already been keeping score of. "Hey, Mars," I said. Her mouth twitched. "You listened." "Yeah, you were supposed to listen yesterday." "I know." She came closer then, not rushing, not dramatic. She hugged me carefully because of the ribs, and because she was old enough now to understand when not to touch someone who'd been hurt. That made it worse somehow. Lena stayed by the window while Avery sat in the chair beside the bed and told me about the planetarium show and the costume, and how her line about Olympus Mons had been changed because the teacher said the earlier version was too technical for the third graders. I listened, actually listened. Every now and then, pain moved through my side or my knee. Our monitor beeped somewhere out in the hall, or a cop passed the door, and I had the odd, dislocated feeling that ordinary life had resumed without asking whether I was ready to rejoin it. When Avery finished, she looked at the brace on my leg. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. Not childish, not frightened, direct. "With work?" I asked. "With everything." Lena turned slightly at the window, but didn't interrupt. I could have lied, said no, said it was complicated, said adults would handle it. Instead, I said, maybe some trouble, but not for the reason I should be. Avery considered that. "That sounds like you. Kids can skin you with one sentence." The company put me on administrative leave pending the investigation, which was the polite corporate way of saying don't move, don't improvise, don't become a liability we have to describe in writing. My truck was totaled. The cargo was destroyed under supervision. Insurance interviews followed. Then federal agents, because once fentanyl moves in quantity under interstate freight, the map gets bigger and the alphabet soup arrives. They wanted route histories, whether I'd noticed unusual instructions on previous loads, whether dispatch was compromised, whether I'd ever stopped at Midwest Transload before. I hadn't, knowingly. Whether Deke or anyone else might have targeted me specifically. That one stayed with me because the answer was maybe, not because I was special. Quite the opposite, because I was predictable. Same fuel chains, same preferences, Same habit of not calling back right away, not escalating weirdness unless it grew teeth. A man easy to study because he'd turned routine into a hiding place. Aaron had been right about that pot. Maybe that was how they got close enough to know about Dana and Avery and my route patterns and the rest. Maybe someone sold information. Maybe social media and dispatcher chatter and plain old observation were enough. No one ever gave me a complete answer. Aaron got one arm in a sling and a cooperating witness agreement that sounded to me like the adult version of being told you can sit at the front of detention if you help name names. He'd done low-level logistics work for a subcontractor that handled repackaged food shipments, then realized where some of the diverted freight was really going. He tried to step back. They made it clear stepping back wasn't a recognized option. We spoke twice after the hospital. The first time was by phone a week later. His voice sounded washed out. "You tell them everything?" he asked. "Everything I had." "Good. Why'd you know so much about me?" He was quiet a second too long. "Because they had a packet," he said. "Driver profile, habits, family basics, pressure points. I saw yours." Something cold settled in me again. Less violent than fear, more permanent. "You should have led with that." "I know. Where'd they get it?" No, I believed he didn't know. I also believed not knowing wasn't the same as safe. The second time I saw him in person was months later, in a federal building hallway outside a pretrial meeting room, both of us in better clothes than we felt natural wearing. He looked thinner, cleaner, older. He nodded at my knee brace, smaller by then, hidden under slacks. "You still driving local runs?" I said. "For now, better hours. Depends what you're measuring." He almost smiled, then didn't. There are people who become part of your life because you love them, others because you forgive them. Aaron belonged to a third category, the people who cross your path at exactly the wrong moment and leave marks anyway. By late autumn, the story had mostly left the news. Charges filed, additional arrests in Iowa and Kansas, asset seizures, a refrigerated freight smuggling network dismantled, according to one article. Dismantled is a generous word. It suggests you found all the pieces. I was back to driving, but not long haul. Regional grocery and medical supply routes along the Front Range and up into Wyoming sometimes. Home often enough that Avery could complain about me in person. Lena still didn't trust my instincts, which was fair, but she trusted my schedule more. That helped. I went to the planetarium show on a Friday evening exactly as instructed. Avery stood under a wash of artificial stars in a cardboard red Mars costume painted with rust-colored swirls and polar caps. She delivered her lines without stumbling once. Afterward, she found me in the lobby and said, "You actually came." "Yeah, on time." "Don't push it," I told her, and she laughed. That laugh did more for me than any physical therapy session. Life didn't turn noble after that. I didn't become a better man all at once because of one bad morning in Nebraska. That would be too easy. What happened instead was smaller and more annoying and probably more real. I started returning calls. I stopped saving difficult conversations for some imaginary safer future. I listened to voicemails when they came in. I checked seals twice. I varied my stops. I looked in mirrors more often than I used to. I also woke at 3:17 a.m. for months, wide awake with the sensation that someone was standing just outside the passenger door waiting for me to decide something. That faded, mostly, Winter came, then spring, and once, at a fuel stop outside Cheyenne, I came back from the restroom carrying bad coffee and saw a man standing near the passenger side front tire of my truck. Every muscle in my body locked at once. He turned, not Aaron, not Deke, just a tired college kid in a denim jacket, staring at my truck number while comparing it to something on his phone. "Sorry," he said immediately. "Thought this was the one my uncle drives." I nodded. Couldn't make my throat work for a second. He walked off. I climbed into the cab and shut the door harder than I needed to. The dome light stayed on for its normal extra second, illuminating the dashboard, the receipt pile. The red flashlight still jammed in the driver's side pocket, though I'd replaced it twice since Nebraska. I sat there listening to the warning chime. Then I looked at my phone. One new voicemail. Unknown number. Nothing about that was unusual. Spam, probably. Wrong number. A machine call. Still, my hand paused over the screen. The chime kept sounding until I pulled the door tighter and made it stop. And I listened to the message. It was only static, not dramatic, not mystical. Probably a bad connection, pocket dial. Somebody's broken headset calling the wrong line and leaving 15 seconds of dead air. I deleted it anyway, but I checked the passenger mirror twice before I pulled back onto the interstate. And all the way south, the road looked ordinary enough that a person could almost believe ordinary was what they had returned to. Almost. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you. Welcome to Mia Horror Stories. To make it easier on your eyes, this video plays against a black screen, so you can close your eyes, get comfortable, and let the story take over. But don't relax too much, the ending might just catch you off guard. Stay with me until the very last word. The first time I heard the machine speak, I thought it was just an intercom bleeding through the wall. Not words at first, just a clipped electronic crackle from the vending alcove at the end of the basement corridor, followed by a flat little chime that did not belong to that hour of night. Hospitals have 1,000 noises, and after enough nights inside one, you begin sorting them automatically. Elevator ding, oxygen alarm, the rubber squeak of transport wheels, the dry cough of the HVAC pushing cold air through old ducts. This sound was close to a card reader accepting payment. Ordinary, boring, even. Then it happened again. A pause, a click, and a voice, thin and metallic, like someone speaking through a plastic cup. "Please insert valid payment." I stopped under the fluorescent light outside radiology storage and listened. The corridor was empty. On one side, cinder block painted a tired off-white, interrupted by metal fire doors and framed notices about infection control. On the other, linen carts parked nose to tail, the loading dock double doors, and that alcove, half shadow, half vending machine glow. The air down there always smelled different from the upper floors, less like antiseptic and more like damp cardboard, bleach, stale coffee, and something faintly mineral, as if the building's bones showed through in the basement. I had a bag of vending machine pretzels in one hand already. That was the strange part. I looked at the bag, looked at the machine. looked back at the bag. Then I laughed once under my breath, because the alternative was to let the feeling grow teeth. My name is Mara Bell. I'm 32, and at that point, I had been working nights in patient transport at St. Agnes Regional for almost 11 months, long enough to know which elevators stuck between B2 and B1 if you overloaded them, long enough to recognize the shape of a code cart from the far end of a hallway, long enough to develop the kind of practical superstition hospital workers pretend not to have. Don't say quiet. Don't ask for an easy shift. Don't check the clock before 2 in the morning unless you want time to harden around you. I picked up night work because it paid a little more, and because my mother had been admitted twice in 1 year before she died, which turned hospitals into a landscape I understood against my will. There were people who found this work noble. I found it specific. Move this patient. Wait here. Hold the door. Find the missing blanket. Stay useful. The flaw in me, if I'm being honest, was that usefulness had become the only shape of life I trusted. Sit still too long, and my mind went places I didn't like. Small enclosed places, elevator stalls, MRI tubes, the locked bathroom where my mother had fallen when I was 15, and I'd had to shoulder the door open because she couldn't answer me. I don't panic in obvious ways. I become efficient, which is its own problem. That night was a Thursday rolling into Friday, somewhere around 1:20 a.m., and I was between transport calls. I had gone down to the basement because the break room on the second floor had run out of anything edible, unless you counted a fruit cup floating in syrup the color of old headlights. Basement vending had better odds. Not better food, better odds. The pretzels in my hand were warm. That was wrong too. I walked closer to the alcove. There were 2 machines recessed into the wall. The snack machine on the left with spirals of chips, crackers, gummy candy, and shelf-stable sandwiches nobody trusted, and the soda machine on the right humming low and steady. Between them was a yellowing sign taped at eye level. Out of order, card reader intermittent use cash or employee cafe on level 1. The sign looked old. Curled corners. Tape gone gray with lint. The snack machine's display glowed green. Instead of prices, the little rectangular screen showed a single line of text. Invalid tender. I frowned. The plastic window reflected me faintly. Navy scrub top under a zip hoodie, ID badge flipped backward, my hair dragged into a tired knot. Pale from the lights. Older than 32 in this building, younger once I got outside it. I stepped up and pressed B6 just to see what happened. The machine clicked, thought about it. Then the same voice said, a little louder, "Please insert valid pay." I stared at the coin slot, at the bill acceptor, at the card reader with its cracked little screen. "Okay," I said to it, because nights do strange things to dignity. Behind me, a cart wheel rattled over a seam in the floor. I turned fast enough to make my badge swing. Eli Foster, 26, male, one of the newer security officers, was pushing a low gray equipment cart with a toolbox riding on top. He had the broad-shouldered build of someone people assumed was calm because he looked anchored. But his face always gave away that he was still learning how much of hospital security is boredom, punctured by deeply stupid emergencies. He wore his dark uniform shirt with the sleeves rolled to the forearms and had a paper cup of coffee balanced against the toolbox handle. You talking to the machines now? He asked. I'm getting attitude from one of them. He parked the cart beside me and glanced at the display. That one's been weird for weeks. Weird how? He shrugged. Rejects cards, eats dollars, gives Dr. Pepper when you hit water. Standard criminal behavior. It says invalid tender. That sounds personal. I held up the pretzels. It already gave me these. He looked at the bag. You pay. I used my badge wallet. Tap didn't work. I put in a 5. It made the noise, dropped the pretzels, then said that. He leaned in, studying the display as if it might confess. Maybe it's stuck on a delayed message. Maybe. The word sat there between us, thin and unsatisfying. He took a sip from the paper cup, grimaced at the taste, and said, You waiting on a call, technically. Then don't let it ruin your night. He nudged the toolbox with his knee. Pharmacy called about a door alarm near bulk storage. I'm chasing ghosts and broken hinges till 3. You say that like there's a difference. He snorted. That was Eli. Easy to joke, easier to underestimate. A lot of people did because he looked young. What I'd noticed about him over the previous few months was that he paid attention when other people stopped. Missing visitor badge, propped stairwell door, volunteer who looked like she was about to faint and insisted she was. He noticed the edges. He was about to move on when the machine clicked again. Neither of us touched it. The display flickered. The green text vanished. For half a second, the screen went blank except for a thin horizontal line. Then new words appeared. Not accepted. Eli lowered the coffee cup slowly. Okay, he said. That's annoying. I said nothing. He pressed the return coin button. Nothing happened. He slapped the side panel with the heel of his hand, not hard, just enough to test it. The machine answered with its recorded voice again. Please insert valid payment. See, he said. Stuck loop. Maybe. This time he heard it in my voice. Hospitals at night can go from noisy to strangely intimate without ever becoming quiet. Somewhere nearby, a compressor cycled on with a groan. A phone rang once in a closed office and stopped. The soda machine kept up its low refrigeration hum. Overhead, one fluorescent tube buzzed faintly, not enough to flicker, just enough to make the light feel tired. Eli and I stood there looking at that dumb machine, as if the answer might rise through the glass, along with the smell of powdered cheese crackers. And my phone vibrated. Transport request. Discharge pickup, 4 West, Oncology. I exhaled. There's my night. Saved by the suffering of others, Eli said. Beautiful motto for the hospital brochure. I started walking backward down the corridor, then paused. Can you call facilities on that thing? The bill acceptor might be jammed. Sure. He tapped the machine one more time with 2 fingers, almost absent-mindedly. The display held steady on not accepted. I left the alcove behind and took the service elevator up. And by the time I was helping an exhausted daughter settle her father into a wheelchair with his prescriptions and blankets stacked in his lap, the machine had shrunk in my mind to what it probably was. Faulty circuitry, stale signage, too much caffeine, too much basement air. That's how most bad things begin. With something you can file under probably. The night dragged on in the usual broken rhythm. A post-op transfer from Paku. A confused old man insisting the telemetry leads were snakes. A nurse on 6 South crying quietly in the med room with the door half shut, while another nurse stood guard, pretending not to notice. At 3:10, I got 5 minutes in the staff lounge and burned my tongue on vending coffee. At 3:27, a transporter from day shift texted the group, had a picture of a raccoon outside the parking garage, wearing an expression of moral disappointment. At 4:00, the halls had that bluish pre-dawn look, even though dawn itself was still far away. Ordinary enough that the basement should have stayed ordinary too. At 4:18, I got sent down for clean transport linens because Central Supply on 3 had come up short. I took the cart elevator alone. By then, my shoulders ached, and I had that dry, grainy feeling behind the eyes that comes from being awake at the wrong end of the clock. When the elevator doors opened into B2, the air hit me colder than before. The vending alcove was on my route, whether I liked it or not. The pretzel bag from earlier was still tucked in the front pocket of my hoodie, forgotten. I could feel the shape of it against my stomach as I pushed the empty linen cart down the corridor. The wheels whispered. The metal frame gave a small, loose rattle over the seams in the floor. My sneakers squeaked once near the loading dock doors where someone had mopped badly and left a damp crescent drying on the polished concrete. Then I heard voices, not machine voices, human ones, low and quick, cut off as I rounded the corner toward the alcove. 2 people were standing there. One was Tessa Vukovic, 41, female, a respiratory therapist who floated between floors, and somehow always looked composed even at 4 in the morning. She was from Croatia originally, or at least that was the accent people guessed it wrong, until she corrected them. She moved with an economy I envied, nothing wasted, no nervous extra gestures. The kind of person who could silence a chaotic room by choosing her words carefully instead of raising her volume. The other was Jonah Keene, 58, male, environmental services, built lean and sinewy from years of lifting what other people left behind. Jonah had worked in the hospital longer than almost anyone on nights. He had a smoker's cough he pretended he no longer deserved because he had quit 6 years ago, and a habit of looking at you for 1 beat longer than expected, as if deciding whether you could handle an honest answer. They both turned when they saw me. The look on Jonah's face lasted less than a second, but I caught it. Not guilt exactly, more like irritation at being interrupted. "What's going on?" I asked. Tessa straightened. "Nothing," she said it too quickly, which in a hospital is as good as saying everything. Jonah scrubbed one hand over his jaw. Machines jammed. At 4:30 in the morning, he shrugged. I parked my linen cart a few feet away. "You two trying to buy a feast?" Tessa gave me a smile that didn't fully arrive. I wanted peanuts. Jonah is being dramatic. About a vending machine. About everything, she said. Jonah ignored that. "Mara, you got cash on you. Maybe a couple dollars. Coins." I blinked. "Why?" He glanced at Tessa, and for the first time she looked away. It was small, that movement, but it pressed somewhere behind my ribs. The machine display read something different now. Exact change only below it, in smaller scrolling text, too fast to catch the first time. Then again. "Tokens, not coins." I stepped closer. "What tokens?" Neither of them answered. The snack spirals sat motionless behind the glass. Rows of crackers and candy and stale sandwiches glowing under the fluorescent bulb inside the machine. But on the metal tray below the bill acceptor, where returned coins should land, there was something that did not belong there. Not a coin, not hospital cafeteria script either. A brass disc, about the size of a quarter, dull with age and dark around the edges. Stamped on one side with a number I couldn't make out from where I stood. Jonah moved his hand over it, not quite covering it. It's nothing. Then why are you asking me for coins? He didn't answer that either. Tessa folded her arms. Go get your linens, Mara. There was no hostility in her voice. That made it worse. It sounded like concern. The cart elevator doors opened and shut at the far end of the hall with a distant hydraulic sigh. Somewhere overhead, pipes knocked softly inside the wall. The basement suddenly felt larger than it had an hour before. The corridors branching off into records storage, maintenance, waste processing, old morgue access, long repurposed into archive rooms nobody visited unless a supervisor made them. Places with histories, places where things got left. I looked from Tessa to Jonah to the brass disc in the return tray. Why do you both look like this matters? I asked quietly. Tessa held my gaze. Jonah didn't. That was answer enough to change the shape of the air. Then my radio crackled at my hip, a burst of static making all three of us flinch harder than we should have. Mara, you copy. Need transport to ED triage. I lifted the radio automatically, but didn't speak yet. On the vending machine display, the scrolling line came back one more time. Tokens not CONS, Jonah said, without looking at me. Take your call, Tessa said, and leave this alone. Those were not the same thing. I had the radio in one hand, the linen cart beside me, a live transport request waiting upstairs, and two coworkers in front of a basement vending machine, acting like it had just asked them a private question out loud. I could answer the radio and walk away, or I could stay long enough to ask why a hospital snack machine seemed to recognize a kind of payment none of us should have had. The radio hissed again in my hand, and this time, before I pressed the talk button, I realized Jonah still hadn't told me where the brass token came from. I pressed the radio. Copy. On my way, I said, because that's what you say when the job calls. Then I didn't move. The three of us stood there in the dim spill of fluorescent light, the machine humming softly like it was breathing. Tessa's arms were still folded, but she'd shifted her weight onto one hip, subtle, defensive. Jonah kept one hand near the tray, not touching the brass disc, just hovering, like he was guarding it without wanting to admit he was. My radio crackled again. Mara, you there? Yeah, I said into it, eyes still on the machine. Give me 2 minutes. I'm grabbing linens. Make it quick. The line went dead. That bought me exactly 2 minutes of dishonesty. I looked at Jonah. Where did you get that? He didn't answer. His jaw tightened the way it did when a conversation was about to turn into something he didn't want. Tessa stepped in before he had to. It was in the tray, she said. Like change. Change from what? A beat. Jonah exhaled through his nose. From the machine. You didn't put anything in. Another beat. This one longer. I did, he said finally. What? He looked at me then, properly, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not fear exactly. Not even anxiety. More like a kind of reluctant calculation. Something it would take, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. The machine clicked. All three of us flinched again, and this time nobody pretended it was nothing. The display shifted. The green text flickered, then steadied. Insufficient value below it, smaller, balance. One eye stepped closer before I could stop myself. Balance of what? Jonah's hand moved quick, and he scooped the brass disc out of the tray, turning it over between his fingers. I caught a glimpse of the stamped number this time. A 1, worn but unmistakable. Don't, Tessa said low. He didn't put it back. Jonah, she added, sharper now. What? He snapped. You want it sitting there? Yes, she said. Exactly that. That's stupid. Is it? They stared at each other for a second that stretched longer than it should have. Not a casual disagreement. Something older underneath it. Something already argued about. I said, you two want to explain what's going on. Jonah let out a short laugh that didn't carry any humor. You really want that right now? Yes, Tessa shook her head slightly. No, she doesn't. I do, I said. The radio on my hip hissed again, impatient this time. Transport, we still need you in triage. I didn't answer. That was my flaw, right there, opening its mouth. The job says move. My body says move. But my brain latches onto the thing that doesn't fit and refuses to let go. It's how I ended up prying open a bathroom door when I was 15 instead of waiting for help. It's how I ended up working nights in a hospital because I couldn't stand being home alone with quiet. And now it was why I wasn't walking away from a vending machine. Tessa saw it happen in real time. Mara, she said, softer now. This isn't your problem. It's in my hallway, I said. That makes it my problem. That's not how hospitals work. That's exactly how they work. Jonah rubbed a hand over his face. We don't have time for this. For what? I asked. Pretending this is normal. It is normal, he said. Machines break. Machines don't ask for tokens. They do if someone reprograms them. Who would do that? He didn't answer. That silence again. Heavy, intentional. The machine clicked once more, like it was impatient with us. Please insert valid payment. Okay, I said, more to myself than them. Okay, let's do this logically. That's not going to help, Tessa said. It always helps. No, she said. It makes you stay longer than you should. I ignored that. It's a vending machine. It runs on a board, sensors, and a payment system. If it's displaying weird messages, something's wrong with the programming or the input. Someone could have swapped parts, messed with the firmware, whatever. That I pointed at Jonah's hand is probably a token from some old system. Cafeteria, laundry, parking, something. Jonah gave me a look that said he appreciated the effort and didn't believe it for a second. Tessa said nothing. I went on anyway because I needed the explanation to hold. So we call facilities or biomed. They open it, reset it, done. Jonah shook his head. We already did. When? Last week and the week before. And they replaced the reader, checked the wiring, said it was fine. Clearly it's not fine. No, he said, it's not. The words landed heavier than they should have. I glanced at the machine again. The display had gone back to exact change only, but the smaller line underneath was gone now. Show me, I said. Jonah hesitated. Show me what you put in, I added. Tessa stepped forward, blocking slightly. No, why not? Because it's stupid, she said, and it doesn't help anything. That's not a reason. It is at 4 a.m. Felt something tighten in my chest. Not panic, not yet. Just that familiar edge, like the moment before a door closes and you realize you're on the wrong side of it. Is this about the token? I asked. Neither of them answered. Is this about how you got it? Jonah's mouth twitched. You ask a lot of questions. It's my job. No, your job is upstairs. And yours is down here pretending nothing's wrong. Tessa's expression hardened slightly. Careful. About what? About making this into something it is. And what is it? A machine that needs fixing, she said. That's all. Then why are you both still here? That did it. Jonah looked away first. Tessa followed a second later. Neither of them had a good answer. The radio crackled again, louder this time, a supervisor's voice cutting through. Transport, we need that pickup now. I swore under my breath. You're going to get written up, Jonah said. Probably. Over this? Maybe. Tessa watched me, something like frustration and concern tangled together. Mara, go. I didn't move. Instead, I said, put it in. Jonah blinked. What? The token, I said. Put it in the machine. No, why not? Because I already did. And it gave me that, he said, holding up the brass disc. And nothing else. Then do it again. Tessa shook her head. No, why? Because it's not how this works. How what works? She hesitated, just a fraction. That was enough. Put it in, I said again, quieter this time. Jonah looked at Tessa. She held his gaze for a long second, then looked away. Fine, he muttered. He stepped forward, raised the token, and slid it into the coin slot. For a second, nothing happened. Then the machine made a different sound, not the usual clunk of coins dropping or bills feeding. A softer, more deliberate click, like something registering the weight of the metal. The display flickered. Balance. 2, I leaned in. It added to it. Jonah frowned. That's not possible. Why not? Because I only put 1 in before. So now it thinks you've put 2. That's not, he stopped. The machine hummed. Louder now, then. Select item, a number pad lit up faintly. I didn't realize I'd stepped closer until my shoulder brushed the glass. Okay, I said, so it's tracking something. Don't, Tessa said immediately. I'm just looking. Mara, I'm not buying anything. You don't know that. It's a vending machine, Tessa. That's exactly the problem. Jonah shifted beside me. Pick something cheap. That's your takeaway. If it works, we know it's just a glitch. And if it does? He didn't answer. I scanned the rows, chips, crackers, candy, same as always. Except one slot. Bottom row, far right, empty. The spiral was bare, the label beneath it scratched off. Where the price should have been, the digital display for that slot flickered differently than the others. Not numbers, just a dash. I pointed. What's that? Jonah leaned in. That wasn't like that before. Before when? Before tonight. Tessa stepped closer now too, despite herself. Don't select it. I'm not going to, I said, but my finger hovered over the keypad anyway. Because the machine was humming, and the air felt tighter somehow, and my brain was doing that thing where it tried to map the space, distance to the elevator, distance to the stairs, how long it would take to get out if something stopped. Just a machine, just a broken system. I pressed A3. The spiral turned. A bag of chips dropped into the tray with a familiar, reassuring thunk. Nothing else happened. We all exhaled at the same time. See, I said, grabbing the chips. Glitch. Jonah nodded slowly, but he didn't look convinced. Tessa looked even less so. The display changed again. Balance. 1, okay, I said. So it deducted 1. That's new, Jonah muttered. Not really. That's how vending machines work. No, he said. That's not how this one's been working. Before I could ask what he meant, the lights flickered. Just once. But in a hospital, that's enough to turn your stomach. The hum of the machines dipped, then came back. Somewhere down the corridor, a door alarm chirped and then went silent. We all turned instinctively toward the sound. What was that? I asked. Jonah was already moving toward his cart. Door sensor, probably the dock. Probably, he didn't answer. Tessa looked between us, then back at the machine. The display had changed again. One then beneath it, slowly scrolling, remaining credit EXPIRES. I felt that tightness in my chest again. Stronger now. Expires when? I asked. No one answered. The radio crackled again, urgent this time. Security to B2 loading dock. Alarm triggered. Possible breach. Jonah swore. That's mine. He grabbed his radio and started down the corridor at a fast walk, then broke into a jog. Tessa watched him go, then looked back at me. "Now do you see why you should leave?" she said. I looked at the machine, at the token slot, at the empty row with the scratched-off label, at the words still crawling across the screen. "Remaining credit expires. I think something's wrong," I said. "Yes," she said. "That's what I've been telling you." "No," I said, "not just the machine." The lights flickered again, longer this time, and somewhere deeper in the basement, something heavy slammed. Not mechanical, not routine. Something that made both of us go still. Tessa's voice dropped. "That's not the dock." My radio crackled one more time, overlapping voices now, less controlled. "Need backup. Door won't. Someone down here." I felt it then. Not panic, but the moment before it. The space closing in, the choice narrowing. I looked at Tessa. She looked at me. Neither of us said it out loud, but it was there anyway. We could go upstairs. Stay out of it. Let security handle whatever was happening. Or we could go toward the noise, toward Jonah, toward whatever had just turned a broken vending machine into something connected to a triggered alarm and a locked door. The machine hummed behind us. "Remaining credit expires." The words felt less like a warning about snacks now, more like a timer we didn't understand. Jonah's footsteps faded fast down the corridor, the slap of his boots swallowed by the long concrete stretch toward the loading dock. His radio kept barking half words. "Hold it, no, don't." Then static. Tessa didn't wait for me to decide. She was already moving. "Come on," she said, not looking back. That decided it. I grabbed the handle of my empty linen cart out of reflex, then let it go. Too loud, too slow. I slipped the bag of chips into my hoodie pocket without thinking, the crinkle sharp in the quiet, and followed her. The basement branched like a diagram you had to memorize by walking it. Straight ahead from the vending alcove, the loading dock corridor, wider, colder, concrete floor scuffed by pallet jacks. To the right, a narrower hall leading toward record storage and the old morgue access, now locked and used for overflow archives. To the left, service elevator, mechanical rooms, waste processing. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead in long strips, some brighter than others, making patches of the hallway feel more solid than the spaces between them. We took the straight path. The air changed 10 steps in cooler, sharper, the faint smell of diesel and outside air leaking through the dock seals. A metal roll-up door sat at the far end, flanked by 2 standard personnel doors with crash bars. The alarm panel was mounted on the right wall just before the doors, a small box with a red LED blinking. Jonah stood there, shoulder angled toward the left-hand door, one hand braced against it as if he just tried to push it open and failed. "What's going on?" I called. He glanced back. "It's stuck." "Locked?" Tessa asked. "No," he said. "It shouldn't be." He shoved the crash bar again. The door gave maybe an inch, then stopped with a hard, immovable resistance. "Something's behind it," he added. "Like what?" If I knew, I wouldn't be asking. I stepped closer, keeping a careful distance from the door itself. Could be a pallet. Someone left something in the way. "At 4 in the morning, Tessa said. "Deliveries come at weird hours." Jonah shook his head. "Delivery scheduled tonight." And the alarm wouldn't trip for that. The red LED blinked steadily. Not frantic, not full alarm, just wrong. His radio crackled. Eli's voice this time, tighter than before. "Jonah, report." "Dock doors blocked," Jonah said. "Something S holding it from the other side." A pause, then. "We're showing it as open." Jonah frowned. "It's not open. Panel says it is." He looked at the small alarm box again, then at the door, then back at the radio. Well, it's lying. Another pause. Longer this time. Stay there, Eli said. I'm on my way. The line cut. We stood there, three of us, staring at a door that shouldn't have been a problem. Let me try, I said. Jonah stepped aside. I put my hand on the crash bar. It was cold, colder than the surrounding metal, like it had been sitting in a draft. Ready, I said. No, Tessa said. I pushed anyway. The door moved that same inch, then stopped hard enough to send a dull shock up my arm. Not locked. Thing solid on the other side. I leaned into it, putting more weight behind the push. Nothing. Okay, I said, stepping back. Yeah, something's there. Or someone, Jonah said. That sat between us for a second. Could be a person, I said. Someone fell against it. At the loading dock, Tessa said. Without anyone noticing, people wander, I said. Confused patients, visitors. Visitors don't get down here, Jonah cut in. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. He wasn't wrong. Hospital's basement wasn't a place you ended up by accident. You had to know the service elevators, the badge access points, the wrong turns that led you deeper instead of back up. Okay, I said. Then staff. Then why aren't they answering? Tessa asked. Jonah knocked on the door. Hard. Hey, he called. Security. If someone's there, move away from the door. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just the faint hum of the building and the distant rattle of something in the ductwork. He knocked again, louder. Move away from the door. Still nothing. I felt that tightness in my chest again. Not full panic. Not yet, just the edges. Could be debris, I said. Something fell. On the outside, Tessa said. There's nothing out there to fall. Trash bins, pallets, not against that door, Jonah said. He stepped back, looking at the frame now, the hinges, the narrow gap where the door had moved. Get me something, he said. We need leverage. I glanced back down the corridor. There's a maintenance closet near the alcove. Pry bar, maybe. Go, he said. I hesitated. The path back to the vending machine suddenly felt longer than it had before. Dimmer, like the light had shifted without actually changing. Go, Tessa said, softer. We'll stay here. I nodded once and turned, forcing my legs to move at a normal pace instead of the too fast, too tight walk my body wanted. The corridor stretched out ahead of me, empty. My footsteps echoed just enough to remind me I was alone. Halfway back, the lights flickered again. Longer this time. The hum of the building dipped, then surged. For a second, the corridor went dim enough that the vending alcove ahead became a darker shape inside the darkness. Then the lights snapped back. I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. Just power fluctuation. Old wiring. Happens all the time. I reached the alcove and went straight to the maintenance closet, a gray metal door with a keypad that stuck half the time. I punched in the code, waited for the click, yanked it open. Inside, shelves of cleaning supplies, a mop bucket, a yellow caution sign, and a rack of tools. I grabbed a pry bar, heavy, cold, reassuring in a simple, mechanical way. Then I paused. The vending machine was right there. Closer now, without Tessa and Jonah between me and it. The display glowed. Balance one below it. Remaining credit EXPIRES. I glanced at the coin slot. Empty. The tray was empty too. The brass token Jonah had used was gone. I frowned. He hadn't taken it with him. I'd seen his hands when we walked away. So where the machine clicked, I froze. The display flickered. Please insert valid payment. Then slower. TOKNS, not coins. I swallowed. Yeah, I muttered. I got that. My eyes drifted to the empty slot again. Bottom row, far right. the one with the scratched off label. The little digital display beneath it flickered once, just a dash. Then, for a split second, a number. 2, then it vanished, back to dash. I stepped closer without meaning to. "Okay," I said quietly. "What does that mean?" the machine hummed. No answer. I shook my head, forcing myself to step back. Not my problem. Except it was. Because the token was gone. Because the machine had changed again. Because something in the basement had just triggered an alarm and blocked a door. I turned and hurried back down the corridor, the pry bar heavy in my hand. When I reached them, Jonah was crouched near the base of the door, peering into the narrow gap. "Got it?" he asked. I handed him the pry bar. He wedged it carefully between the door and the frame, just above the crash bar. "Stand back," he said. We did. He leaned into it, muscles in his arms tightening as he pulled. The metal groaned. The door shifted another inch, maybe 2. Something scraped on the other side, a dragging sound. Then it stopped again. "Again," he muttered. He reset the bar, pulled harder. The door gave a little more, enough for a narrow gap at the bottom, enough for me to see a shape. Dark, solid, low to the ground. "Stop," I said. Jonah froze. "What?" he asked. "There's something there." "No kidding." "No, I mean," I crouched, lowering myself carefully, keeping my distance from the gap. It's not a pallet." "What is it?" I leaned closer, squinting. The light didn't reach well under the door, just a dim gray wash. The shape shifted slightly. My stomach dropped. "It moved," I said. Tessa stepped back. "What?" "It moved." Jonah's grip tightened on the pry bar. "Someone's there, maybe." I leaned closer again, heart starting to pick up now. "Hey," I called softly. "Can you hear me?" The shape shifted again. Then a sound, a low, wet scrape. I jerked back, slamming my shoulder into the wall behind me. "What is it?" Tessa demanded. "I don't." I stopped, listened. There it was again, the scrape, then a faint, irregular thumping. Jonah eased the door open another fraction. The gap widened just enough for the light to spill in properly, and the shape resolved into something real. Not a person, not alive. A stack of plastic-wrapped medical waste bins, tipped over and wedged against the door, one of them partially split open. Inside, bags, red, bulging. Scraping sound was one of the bins shifting under its own weight as we moved the door. The thumping, a loose lid knocking against the floor with each small shift. I let out a breath that felt like it had been sitting in my chest for 10 minutes. "Okay," I said. "Okay, that's okay." Tessa leaned in, saw it, and exhaled too. "Jesus." Jonah straightened, tension draining slightly from his shoulders. "Told you it wasn't a person." "You said it could be," I shot back. "I said it might be. That's the same thing." "Not to me." We all laughed a little then. Too quick, too thin. The kind of laugh that comes out when your body needs to reset. Misdirection. That's what it was. Not a threat, just a mess. "Except why are these here?" I asked. Jonah frowned. "They shouldn't be." "Exactly. Medical waste wasn't stored at the dock like this. It had a specific route, specific handling, specific rooms. This was wrong." "Someone moved them," Tessa said. "Why?" I asked. No one had an answer. Jonah shoved the bins aside enough to clear the door fully, then pushed it open. Cold air rushed in from outside. The loading dock beyond was empty. A concrete bay with yellow striped edges, a dumpster to one side, a forklift parked near the far wall. No people, no movement. "Panel said it was open," Jonah muttered. "Guess it was right." "But blocked," I said. "Yeah." His radio crackled again. "Jonah, door's clear," he said. "False alarm," a pause. Then Eli again. "No, not false. Jonah frowned. What? We've got another alert, Eli said. Basement corridor, motion trigger. I felt something cold slide through my chest. Where? Jonah asked, a beat then, near the vending alcove. All three of us went still. The corridor behind us stretched back the way we'd come. Long, empty, quiet, too quiet. Tessa turned first. We need to go back. Why? I asked, even though I already knew. Because whatever set that off is still down here, she said. And the machine, I said. She didn't answer. Jonah grabbed the pry bar and started moving. I followed, because at that point, turning away felt worse than going toward it. We moved faster this time, not running, but close. The corridor seemed longer now, the lights harsher. Halfway back, my chest tightened again. That familiar pressure. Too enclosed, too narrow, too stop. Keep moving. We reached the alcove, and everything changed. The machine was different, not broken, not flickering. Active. The display glowed brighter than before. Balance 0 below it. Remaining credit expired, and the empty slot, the one with the scratched label, was no longer empty. Something sat there now. A small, dark object, half hidden behind the spiral. Not chips, not candy, something else. Jonah stopped dead. That wasn't there before. No, I said. Tessa's voice was barely above a whisper. It's changing. The machine clicked. Then, please insert valid payment. The words felt heavier now. Less like a prompt, more like a demand. Behind us, somewhere deeper in the basement, a door slammed again. Closer this time, and my radio crackled with overlapping voices. Lost visual. Who's down there? Don't let the signal cut. Dead. I reached for the service elevator button out of instinct. Pressed it. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. Jonah tried the stairs door. Locked. Power fluctuation, I said, even as my voice tightened. No, Tessa said. Then what? She looked at the machine. At the slot. At the object inside. We're not leaving yet, she said. And that was the moment I understood. Not that we were trapped, but that leaving wasn't going to be simple anymore. Because whatever this was, machine, tokens, alarms, it had moved from strange to active, and we were in the middle of it. The object in the empty slot looked black at first. Then Jonah stepped closer, and the vending machine's fluorescent interior caught on one edge of it, and I saw it wasn't black. It was dark red, glossy in places, matte in others. A hospital ID badge reel, not attached to a badge. Just the reel, clipped to a short strip of torn navy fabric like it had come off a scrub top by force. Jonah stopped so abruptly the pry bar hit the floor with a crack. Tessa said, "Don't touch it." Her voice had changed. Less guarded now, stripped down. I stared at the little object behind the spiral. Whose is that? No one answered. The service elevator button behind me stayed dead. The stairwell door stayed locked under Jonah's hand. The whole basement seemed to have narrowed into this one patch of light around the vending machine, with the long corridors running away from us like dark veins. The machine clicked. Please insert valid payment then. Balance required. I turned to Tessa. Tell me what this is. Right now. She looked at the reel, not the machine, the reel. I don't know all of it, she said. That's not good enough. It's what I have. Jonah swore under his breath and picked the pry bar back up. No more dancing around it, Tess. She nodded once, still staring at the slot. A few months ago, she said, Night Shift started talking about lost things in the basement. Small things, badges, rings, pens, a pager once. People thought it was just the usual. Stuff dropped, swept away, stolen. I said. Stolen by who? We didn't know. Still don't, Jonah muttered. Tessa went on. Then one of the transporters said the machine gave him back a token instead of quarters. He thought it was a joke. He put it in again later and got. She stopped. What? I asked. Her jaw tightened. His wedding ring. That landed hard in the space between us. No, I said, because it was easier than thinking. He'd lost it 3 weeks earlier, she said. In a glove change, he thought. Tore the locker room apart looking for it. And you believed him. I believed he had the ring in his hand. Jonah said. Then people started trying it. I looked at him. Trying what? The tokens, the machine, seeing what came back. You're telling me staff have been feeding random metal discs into a basement vending machine because it spits out lost property. Nobody called it that out loud, he said. Not at first. Jesus Christ. Yeah, he said. That part's fair. The machine hummed louder. The display changed. Balance required. 2 item held 0451, a timer. Or a deadline. My mouth went dry. Held for who? No answer. Of course. I stepped closer to the glass until I could see my own face reflected beside the torn reel. Pale, strained, eyes too wide. In the reflection, Tessa looked older than she had an hour ago. Jonah looked angry in the way people do when fear has been forced to wear work boots. Whose reel is it? I asked. Jonah looked away. That told me enough. Jonah. He rubbed at his face with his free hand. Darla. The name meant nothing for 1 second, then clicked into place. Darla Ruiz, 39, female, EVS nights. Fast walker, smoker's laugh, purple water bottle covered in stickers. I'd seen her on and off for months, usually pushing a supply cart one-handed and cursing gently in Spanish when wheels locked up. I hadn't seen her in days. People call out, I said. They quit. She didn't quit, Tessa said. How do you know? Because her locker still has her shoes in it. The sentence was so plain it made the hair on my arms lift. I heard my own voice come out flatter than I felt. Did anyone report her missing? Jonah said. Supervisor marked it as no call, no show, then job abandonment after 72 hours. That's insane. He gave a dry laugh. Welcome to understaffing. I looked at the badge reel again. And you think the machine has her things? No, Tessa said. I think someone used the machine with her things. That was worse. For a second, nobody moved. Then the radio at Jonah's shoulder spat static and Eli's voice broke through, thin and chopped up. By archives. Saw someone, blue scrubs, then dead air again. Blue scrubs. My hand went unconsciously to the front pocket of my hoodie, where the warm pretzel bag and crumpled chips sat. Plastic crackled under my fingers. My own badge hung at my chest. The basement suddenly felt occupied in a new way, not haunted, not watched by something impossible, just threaded with the possibility of a real person who knew how to stay hidden in service corridors and utility rooms. Tessa said, "We need Eli." Jonah shook his head. "We need the stairs open. We need both. We don't have both." The machine clicked again. Item held 0432, it was counting down. I said, "If it wants a balance of 2, where do we get another token?" Jonah and Tessa exchanged a look that made me cold. "What?" I asked. Jonah reached into his breast pocket slowly, like the movement hurt him, and took out another brass token. Same size, same worn edge, different number stamped into it, 4. "You had won the whole time," I snapped. "I took this one 3 nights ago," he said. "From the machine," he nodded, and didn't think to mention that. "I thought if I kept it on me, I wouldn't come back down here." Tessa said quietly, "That didn't work." No, it hadn't. Because here we were, I held out my hand. "Give it to me." Jonah didn't move. "Give it," I said again. He placed the token in my palm. It was warmer than it should have been, as if he'd been turning it over in his pocket for hours. The stamped number bit faintly into my skin. A simple plan presented itself, because simple plans are what frightened brains crave. Put in the second token, get the reel, walk away, find Eli, call police, open records, make this part of the world obey paperwork again. Simple didn't mean safe. "Don't do it alone," Tessa said. "I'm standing right here." "That's not what I mean." I knew what she meant. My flaw had sharpened to a point by then. The tighter the space, the more my mind wanted one task, one objective, one thing to fix. It cut panic into narrow strips. It also made me stupid. I took a breath, tried to widen my focus. Corridor behind us. Dead elevator to the left. Loading dock straight back. Records hall off to the right. If someone was moving down here, they had options. More than we did. Jonah hefted the pry bar. "I'll watch the hall." Tessa pulled a pair of trauma shears from her scrub pocket. Respiratory therapists carry odd little tools, and held them low at her side, like she hated that she had to think this way. "If this is somebody's game," she said, "they want us looking at the machine." "That's comforting," I said. "It's meant to be useful." I slipped the brass token into the coin slot. The machine accepted it instantly. A softer click than before. Certain. The display changed. Balance 2 then. Make selection the empty slot with the reel behind it flashed once. Not a code, just the dash becoming bright. I pressed the corresponding button bottom row, far right. The button itself had no label, so I guessed by position, counting down from the top and across. Nothing happened. "Again," Jonah said. I pressed harder. The machine emitted a low mechanical clunk from deep inside its body. A motor engaged. The spiral before the reel began to turn slowly, reluctantly, as if it hadn't been used in years. Half a turn, 3/4. The reel slid forward, caught, hung, then dropped into the tray with a hard plastic knock. We all jumped at the same moment. I bent fast and grabbed it. The torn fabric strip came with it, along with something else wedged underneath. Half of a laminated hospital ID card, snapped across the middle. The photo side. Darla Ruiz. Smiling in the picture, head slightly tilted, dark hair pulled back. The blue background faded from being carried too often. Not a ghost story. Not a curse. A real woman with a real face and a broken badge in my hand. My stomach turned. Tessa whispered, "Oh no." Then the lights went out. Not flickered. Out. Total black for one hard second. Someone inhaled sharply, maybe me. Then the red emergency lights kicked on along the baseboards and over the exit signs, washing the basement in a low, bloody glow that made every corner look deeper and every doorway look occupied. The vending machine stayed lit. Of course it did, bright and clean and indifferent. My chest cinched so tight it hurt. The red lights flattened distance. The corridor ceilings seemed lower. I could hear my pulse in my ears. Jonah's voice came rough and immediate. "Mara, talk. I'm here, Tessa. Here, good. Count bodies. Anchor, simple." Then we heard the footsteps. Not running, not sneaking either. Rubber soles on concrete from the records corridor to our right. Measured, unhurried. Someone who knew exactly how afraid that pace would make other people. Jonah raised the pry bar. Tessa lifted the shears, ridiculous and real at the same time. I turned toward the sound with Darla's broken badge clenched in one fist. A figure stepped into the mouth of the hall. Blue scrubs, pale surgical cap, face mask hanging loose around the neck. For one insane half-second, with the red emergency lighting and the distance and the hour, it looked unreal enough to break me. Then the figure stepped closer, and reality reassembled around details. Male, medium height, stocky. Housekeeping cart key ring clipped at the waistband. One side of the scrub top darker where something had soaked and dried. Not blood, I realized a second later. Coffee, maybe, or chemicals. I knew him. Not well. By sight. Leon Mercer, 47, male, night maintenance float. The kind of staff member everybody recognized and nobody actually knew. He fixed ceiling tiles, hauled broken equipment, had a face that folded into politeness without ever getting warm. He looked at the three of us, at the machine, at the badge in my hand. Then he sighed. Not surprise, annoyance. "That wasn't for you," he said. It was such a human sentence that it scared me more than anything the machine had done. Jonah barked, "Don't move." Leon's eyes flicked to the pry bar. "What, you're gonna hit me with that in a hospital corridor?" "If I need to." Leon looked at me again. "At Darla's photo. You people never stop poking." Tessa said, "Where is she?" He gave a tiny shrug. "Not here." My mouth tasted like metal. "What did you do to her?" "Nothing she didn't make easy." Jonah lunged before the rest of us could react. He wasn't a fighter. He was a tired man with a pry bar and a direction for his fear. Leon sidestepped the swing more from instinct than skill, but not fully. The bar caught his forearm with a meaty crack. Leon shouted, stumbled back into the corridor wall, and something metallic flew from his pocket keys, or another token. I couldn't tell. Then everybody moved at once. Leon shoved Jonah hard in the chest. Jonah went down backward, hitting the concrete with the back of his head, and a sound I still hear sometimes when I wake up too fast. Tessa darted in and slashed with the trauma shears, not stabbing, just going for the face to make space. Leon jerked away, arm up, and the shears bit into his cheek near the ear. He screamed and backhanded her. She hit the vending machine shoulder first and crumpled, not out, but stunned. And then it was me. No plot armor, no cinematic bravery, just proximity. Leon grabbed for my wrist, the one holding the broken badge, maybe to take it back, maybe just because it was there. I reacted stupidly and directly, the same way I had with the bathroom door years earlier, with all the force I had and no plan after that. I slammed the pretzel bag and chip packet from my pocket into his face out of pure reflex. Plastic burst. Salt and crumbs exploded uselessly everywhere. He flinched, more from surprise than pain. I drove my shoulder into his middle. He was heavier than me by a lot. I felt it instantly, like trying to move a vending machine, almost funny if my teeth hadn't clicked together so hard. But he was off balance from Jonah's swing, and momentum is a real thing. We both went sideways into the machine. The glass front shuddered with a huge concussive bang. Something inside broke, not the glass, deeper, a shelf or a motor housing. Leon pinned me for one horrible second against the corner edge. All the air punched out of my lungs. The world narrowed to red light, his breath, detergent and coffee on his scrubs, and the brutal fact of weight in a tight space. My chest seized. Full claustrophobic panic this time, hot and electric. Can't breathe. Can't move. Can't, then Tessa, half on her knees, drove the blunt handle of the trauma shears into the back of Leon's knee. He collapsed enough for space to return. I sucked in air like it was something I'd stolen. Jonah, dazed but moving, grabbed Leon's dropped key ring from the floor and hurled it down the corridor. Instinct took over. Leon twisted toward the sound. That gave Jonah time to get both hands on the pry bar again and jam its hooked end across Leon's throat, not choking, not for long, just using it as a rigid lever to pin him against the vending machine. "Call it in," Jonah shouted, voice ragged. My radio was still dead. "Tessa, S2. Leon thrashed. The machine behind him groaned under the impact. One of the fluorescent tubes inside it shattered with a dry pop, spraying white dust behind the glass. And then I saw it. Clipped inside Leon's waistband, almost hidden by his scrub top, 3 more brass tokens on a split ring. The strange currency, not magic, inventory. I yanked them free. Leon felt it immediately. He bucked harder, nearly throwing Jonah off. "No," he shouted, finally losing that flat, bored tone. "Don't, too late." The ring slipped from my hand, struck the metal lip of the coin tray, and 2 of the tokens ricocheted straight into the machine's coin slot. Accepted. One after the other. The display flashed wildly. Balance, 2 balance, 3 error dispense. Every motor in the machine kicked at once. Spirals turned. Cans dropped. Chips spilled. Plastic bottles slammed into the retrieval bin in a chaotic avalanche. Leon jerked in shock as the machine vibrated violently against his back. Then something heavier dropped from the bottom right slot. A metal clack, different from the rest. A badge. Another reel. A ring. A cheap silver chain. Objects jammed in the bin all at once. Items no vending machine should have been holding. Leon stopped struggling for one fatal half-second and looked down. Jonah used it. He drove forward with everything left in him, pinning Leon harder. The compromised machine lurched on its base, tipped 2 inches, then another. Its leveling foot must already have been damaged from our collision, because suddenly the whole thing was going. "Move," Tessa screamed. We let go at the same instant. The vending machine came down sideways with a catastrophic crash, taking Leon with it. His leg didn't clear. The sound that followed was wet and mechanical and deeply human. He screamed once, then again higher. Silence after that, except for the settling rattle of chips and bottles inside the fallen machine. No one moved for a second. Then training, such as it was, returned in ugly fragments. "Don't touch him," Tessa said, breathless and shaking. "Check breathing, Mara, radio again. Jonah, God, Jonah, are you with me?" Jonah was sitting on the floor, one hand to the back of his head, blood working through his fingers. "Yeah," he lied. I hammered my radio until it sputtered back to life with a burst of static. "Officer down maintenance, down B2 vending alcove, send everyone now." This time it went through. The minutes after that broke apart in shards. Tessa kneeling by Leon's shoulder, because whatever he had done, he was still a man with a crushed leg and a pulse. Jonah drifting in and out of focus, but staying upright through pure malice. Me sitting with my back against the dead elevator doors, Darla's broken badge still in my hand so tightly the plastic edge cut my palm. Eli arrived first with another security officer, then the code team, then more people, more light, more voices, more official language trying to fit itself over what had happened. They found Darla an hour later in an unused records room off the right-hand corridor, alive, but severely dehydrated, concussed, wrists zip-tied, hidden behind rolling archive shelves. Not dead, not okay either. Leon had been using staff access, the basement blind spots, and the machine as a grotesque lure, feeding in stolen items and tokens he made from old decommissioned laundry brass, pulling curious night workers back down one by one, isolating them in the part of the hospital least visited before dawn. Not supernatural, just patience, access, and the fact that institutions are full of places where people can disappear briefly without the building admitting it. Leon survived. Jonah's head wound needed staples. Tessa had a bruised shoulder and 2 cracked ribs from hitting the machine. I went upstairs on oxygen for 20 minutes because once the adrenaline was gone, my lungs locked down so hard they thought I might have taken a blow to the chest. By daylight, the machine was draped in yellow evidence tape and lying on its side like any other piece of broken equipment. Resolved, technically. But when they finally pried open the machine casing for inventory, security logged 37 non-vending items from inside it. Keys, rings, ID pieces, a silver crucifix, 2 watches, and 1 object nobody on staff could match to any report. A child's plastic visitor wristband, printed 6 months earlier from a patient unit that had never been connected to the basement at all. That was the part that stayed with me. Not because it meant anything impossible, because it didn't. Because it meant there were losses nobody had tracked. Small disappearances everyone had accepted as the normal tax of a hospital. And because if the machine had not jammed when it did, if the credit had not expired, if Jonah had not kept that last token in his pocket out of guilt or fear or both, then Darla might have stayed hidden until morning rounds or lunch or longer. A system had almost swallowed her because the signs were boring enough to ignore. That's worse than a ghost. They kept me in the emergency department until nearly noon, not because I was the worst hurt, but because panic attacks and chest injuries can look enough alike to make people nervous. I lay on a narrow bed behind a curtain while the hospital I worked in changed shape around me. During a normal shift, the ED had a rhythm I understood from the outside, sliding doors, quick footsteps, curtained murmurs, monitors chirping like impatient birds. As a patient, even a temporary one, all of it became stranger, slower in some places, too fast in others. People asked me the same questions in different uniforms. What happened? Did you lose consciousness? Any history of asthma? Can you take a deep breath for me? The answer to that last one kept embarrassing me. I could, technically. It just felt like my ribs had cinched themselves shut around something hot and electric. They did the EKG, chest X-ray, pulse ox. A physician assistant with tired eyes told me my lungs were clear, and my heart was fine, and what I'd had was an acute stress response complicated by chest wall trauma, which was a polished way of saying I'd been crushed against a vending machine, and my brain had mistaken present danger for every trapped feeling it had ever remembered. They gave me oxygen for a while anyway. Then ibuprofen. Then ginger ale in a paper cup that went warm before I finished half of it. I still had Darla's broken badge when they wheeled me upstairs for imaging. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean physically. I had tucked it into the pocket of the hospital gown without realizing it, and when a nurse helped me sit up, it clattered onto the floor. She looked at it, then at me, "You want me to bag that with your things?" I said yes too fast. Later, when a security supervisor came to take my statement, the bagged badge sat on the tray table between us beside my phone, my scrubs in a clear belongings sack, and the untouched pretzel bag that had burst in Leon's face. The pretzels smelled faintly of stale salt and machine heat. I could not stop looking at them. The supervisor's name was Helen Price, 53, female, former county deputy, now director of security for St. Agnes. She wore civilian clothes with a blazer over them, as if that made hospital violence easier to sort from regular violence. She had a notepad, though I could see a recorder light blinking inside her open tote bag. No games, just two forms of documentation at once. She asked good questions, not dramatic ones, the useful kind. Where were you standing when he first came into view? Which hand had the tokens? Did Leon say Darla's name before or after you retrieved the badge? Would Jonah have struck first if Leon hadn't advanced? Did the machine fall because someone pushed it intentionally? I answered as precisely as I could, because precision is what people ask for after chaos, and because I still believed, stupidly maybe, that if I got the details right enough, the whole thing would pin itself back together in a shape that made sense. It didn't. What came out instead was a practical ugliness. Yes, Leon had access to the basement because maintenance floats had broad badge privileges. Yes, Darla had been found in the records overflow room off Corridor C, beyond the old morgue access, behind movable archive shelving that could be locked on one end with a maintenance key. Yes, the surveillance coverage in B2 had gaps, loading dock angle, archive hall dead zone, part of the alcove itself obscured by a support column. Yes, staff had reported lost property over the last 6 months, though most of it had never escalated beyond informal complaints or replacement badge requests. Yes, the machine had been repaired more than once, which mostly meant someone had opened the panel, swapped obvious parts, and closed it again. No, nobody had connected the pattern in time. When Helen finished, she capped her pen and said, "You did the right thing." I almost laughed. "No," I said. "I did a lot of reckless things in a row. You still helped stop him. That doesn't make the other part untrue." She considered that, then nodded once. Fair. That made me trust her more than reassurance would have. By mid-afternoon, they let me go home under strict instructions not to drive if I felt dizzy, and to come back if the chest tightness worsened. An occupational health nurse handed me a packet on post-incident counseling in a folder with the hospital logo at the top, as if trauma became manageable once it had branding. I tucked it under my arm and took the staff exit because I couldn't make myself walk past the basement elevators. Outside, daylight felt rude. The parking structure was full of heat and reflected glare. Every car door slam sounded too much like something beginning. I sat in my Honda for a long time before turning the key, hands resting uselessly on the steering wheel, staring at the concrete wall ahead of me with its faded arrows and peeling yellow paint. Home was 23 minutes away if traffic was kind. I made it in 35 because I kept slowing down at lights after they changed green, my body lagging behind the rest of the world. Inside my apartment, everything was exactly where I'd left it. Shoes by the door, 2 mugs in the sink, the blanket half folded on the couch. That was almost the worst part. The world had not rearranged itself to acknowledge what the night had been. The refrigerator still hummed. My upstairs neighbor still dropped something heavy at 4:17 every afternoon, as if by ritual. A package from a pharmacy sat outside the wrong door down the hall. I showered because the basement smell had gotten into me somehow. Detergent, dust, stale, cold air, metal. When I closed the bathroom door, my chest tightened immediately. I opened it again and left it open while the water ran. That was the first clear crack. The second came when I tried to sleep. Every time I drifted, the red emergency lights came back. Not as a dream exactly, more like a physical memory waiting behind my eyes. The heavy footing in the corridor. The way Leon had sighed when he saw us, like we were the inconvenience. The moment of being pinned against the machine, when breath became a problem instead of something automatic. I kept jerking awake with my fists clenched. Around 7 that evening, my phone buzzed. Tessa. I stared at her name for a second before answering. "How are your ribs?" I asked instead of hello. A small exhale on the line that might have been a laugh. "Painful. Yours." Everything hurts in a way that feels petty compared to the drama of it. "That sounds right." She was quiet a moment. I could hear traffic on her end, then a car door shut. "I'm parked outside my building," she said. "I've been sitting here 20 minutes because I don't want to go into the elevator." That image landed with a clean, sad accuracy. "You don't have to use it," I said. "I live on the 8th floor." "Oh, yes." We both let that sit. Then she said, "Darla is awake." I straightened on the couch too fast, and my chest complained. "Really? She spoke to detectives this afternoon." "Not everything. Enough." Waited. "She said he started with small things," Tessa said. "Keys, badges, misplaced property. He'd find them, return them, make himself useful. She thought he was harmless. Then one night he told her he'd found her missing bracelet in the basement. She went down on her break." Tessa paused. "After that, her memory is patchy. Head injury, dehydration. They think he kept her sedated some of the time with meds stolen from unsecured returns." I shut my eyes. Not supernatural. Not random. Just escalation. "Is she going to be okay?" I asked. "Body first," Tessa said. "Mind later, probably." That answer felt truer than a comforting one would have. We talked for another minute or two, clumsy and tired. Practical things. Workers, comp forms. Which supervisor had already started speaking in damage control language. Whether Jonah had really tried to refuse the staples because he didn't have time for vanity. Then Tessa said she should go upstairs before she slept in the car. And when the call ended, my apartment felt both fuller and emptier than before. Jonah texted close to midnight. "Got 7 staples. Mild concussion. Wife says I'm an idiot. She's correct." Then, a minute later, I should have said something sooner. I looked at the words for a long time before answering. "About the token." He replied almost immediately. "About all of it, Darla. The machine. People joking about getting stuff back." I knew it was wrong before I knew why. I typed 3 different responses and deleted them. Finally, I sent, "You came back anyway." He didn't answer for a while. Then, yeah, that was enough for the night. The days after unfolded in the language institutions use when they need to look decisive without admitting how long they have been asleep. Internal review. Security audit. Temporary closure of basement access corridors. Third-party assessment. Counseling resources available. Anonymous hotline for concerns. The vending machine disappeared under a blue tarp first, then entirely. Facilities removed it during daylight with a pallet jack and 3 people in reflective vests. And if you didn't know what had happened, you could have mistaken the whole thing for a routine equipment swap. Someone put a new machine there a week later. Not immediately. Not so fast it would look obscene, but sooner than I expected. Different brand, brighter front panel, tap to pay only. Rows of granola bars where the stale sandwiches used to be. The hospital couldn't tolerate an empty alcove for long. Vacancies in systems make people ask questions. I went back to work after 9 days. Occupational health wanted more. My rent wanted less. They moved me to days for 2 weeks as a supportive transition, which meant I spent a lot of time acting normal under sunlight, while coworkers tried to look at me in a way that was caring, but not hungry. Hospitals are factories for gossip, dressed as concern. Some people knew the broad version. Some knew the invented one. I heard ID fought off an armed intruder with scissors. I heard Leon had been running an organ theft ring, which would have been almost funny if it weren't so stupid. I heard Darla had never existed, which is the kind of rumor that tells you exactly how badly people want ugliness to become folklore instead of paperwork. Darla existed. I saw her 3 weeks later. Not in the basement. In physical therapy of all places, walking slowly beside parallel bars with an aide hovering nearby. She had lost weight. Her hair was shorter, hacked unevenly around one side where they'd shaved for stitches. But it was her, purple water bottle and all. She saw me at the same moment. For a second, I thought one of us might pretend not to. Instead, she lifted a hand. Small wave, no smile. I crossed the hall and stopped a careful distance away. Hi. Her voice was rougher than I remembered. You look, I started, then stopped, because every ending to that sentence was wrong. Like hell, she offered. A little, I admitted. Good means I'm alive. The aide tactfully drifted farther down the bars. I said, Tessa told me some. Then she told you the nice version. We stood there in the bright, over-clean PT hallway with a volunteer cart squeaking somewhere behind us and sunlight striping the floor through high windows. Ordinary reality, back again. Cracks showing. I'm sorry, I said finally. Darla looked at me for a moment. For what part? That was the problem, wasn't it? There were too many parts. For not noticing sooner, I said. She shifted her grip on the bar. None of you noticed sooner. That was the point. No blame in it, which somehow hurt more. Then she nodded toward my badge. You get a new reel. I looked down. Hospital issued black plastic. Generic. Fine. Yeah, I said, good. Her eyes moved past me then, following something I couldn't see yet. An orderly pushing an equipment cart. A man in a neck brace. Life going by. When she looked back, her expression had gone flatter. Don't go down there alone, she said. I wasn't planning to. I don't mean the basement. She tapped the bar once. I mean any place at work where the walls get narrow and everyone's too busy to notice you didn't come back. Then her aide returned, and the moment was over. I thought about that sentence for days. By early spring, most of the visible damage had been repaired. The records room lock changed. Additional camera coverage installed. New policy on access badges and decommissioned brass. Supervisors suddenly rediscovered the concept of checking on missed breaks. Leon's case moved through the court system in the blunt, procedural way violence becomes a file. He pled not guilty at arraignment, which enraged Jonah so much he had to leave the room. And later, over coffee in the staff lounge, he said, Can you imagine the nerve? Like nerve was the only thing a man like that had ever truly possessed. Tessa stopped taking the basement elevator entirely. She would walk the long route through Central Sterile and down the freight corridor, even when it added 10 minutes. Jonah went down there more than anyone after he came back, almost defiantly, but never without checking his radio twice, and never without a flashlight clipped to his belt, even in full daylight. Eli got promoted, not because of that night exactly, but because afterward people noticed he had been right about a lot of small things before anyone wanted to hear them. And me, I kept working. That sounds thin after everything, but it's the truest ending I've got. I kept working. I learned which hallways I could tolerate again, and which ones still made my skin tight. I stopped forcing closed doors if they stuck. I left bathrooms unlocked when I showered at home. I started reluctantly, and then with more commitment, seeing the counselor from the packet with the hospital logo on it. She had a calm office and a lamp that made everything look less medical, and she asked impossible questions in a tone that made answering feel almost practical. What do you do when you cannot make usefulness protect you? What happens in your body before you notice fear? Which is worse now, being trapped or being ignored? I didn't have elegant answers, but I kept showing up. About 6 weeks after the night in the basement, I went down to B2 on purpose for the first time. Not alone. Eli walked with me under the excuse of checking camera angles, though we both knew it wasn't really about that. The new machine stood in the alcove where the old one had been, humming in a clean, modern way. No cracked card reader, no old tape marks, no sign it had ever been otherwise. Eli bought a seltzer he didn't want. The machine accepted his card, dispensed normally, and displayed a cheerful green thank you. "See," he said, "Mom, you don't sound convinced." "I'm convinced the new machine works." That's progress. Maybe it was. We started back toward the elevator. I made myself look into the records corridor as we passed. Just a hall. Just cinder block and overhead lights, and the institutional smell of paper, dust, floor wax. Nothing waiting there. Then something small caught my eye in the seam where the wall met the floor near the alcove baseboard. I crouched before I could think better of it. "What?" Eli asked. There was a tiny brass-colored disc wedged in the dust. Not big enough for a quarter. Thinner. The kind of thing that could have fallen from old equipment, a button battery cover, a washer, any number of harmless explanations. I dug it free with my fingernail. It was only a laundry token. That's what I told myself immediately. Old brass from some decommissioned system, missed in cleanup, nothing more. On one side, worn almost smooth. On the other, just visible when I turned it toward the fluorescent light, a stamped number. One I didn't say anything. Eli was still waiting. I closed my fist around it and stood up. "Nothing," I said. That wasn't a lie exactly. Just not the whole truth. And maybe that's the part that lingers worst. Not the broken machine. Not Leon. Not even the basement itself. Just the knowledge that systems can be cleaned, replaced, relabeled, and still leave one small piece of themselves behind in the dust, waiting for whoever knows what they're looking at. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tales waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another, if you dare.